Chapter 1055. Power was a good thing. Sometimes, power could solve all problems. Of course, love was an exception. After all, a forced melon would not be sweet. In Chu Xiu's opinion, calling Divine Lord Luo an idiot was a compliment. He was arrogant, brainless, and insolent. All the negative adjectives could be used to describe him. However, Divine Lord Luo only had one advantage, and that was his strength. Although Chu Wuji was a warrior in the early stage of the true fire spiritual refinement realm, his combat power was not weak. At least, he was considered average among the warriors in the true fire spiritual refinement realm in the Jianghu. However, when he faced Sir God Luo, he still could not fight back at all. However, Divine Lord Luo's strength was only in the eyes of an ordinary true fire spirit refinement realm warrior. Chu Xiu was not an ordinary true fire spirit refinement realm warrior. He could not be bothered to talk nonsense with Divine Lord Luo. Since no one else appeared in the heavenly gates, killing one was killing. Killing two would make up a pair. Chu Xiu held the formation-breaking saber in his hand. Their minds were connected. It felt much more comfortable than when he used the evil moon saber. As the saber slashed down, time and space seemed to freeze. As the ethereal slash descended, everything in its path returned to its origin. Everything within the range of the ethereal slash turned into the power of extreme yin and dissipated in the air. Divine Lord Luo was already regretting his decision after Chu Xiu slashed with his saber. Just like what Chu Xiu had said, although he did not have any good points and often caused trouble, his only advantage was his strength. Divine Lord Luo was also one of the oldest divine generals in the heavenly gates. He had experienced many divine general rankings, but he still firmly held his position. It could be said that he had rich combat experience. In the instant that Chu Xiu drew his saber, 3 words appeared in his mind: unstoppable. However, the power of the misty slash could confine space. He was like a man in a painting. He could only watch as the saber slashed down. Immortal Lord Luo bellowed angrily as he performed a seal with both hands. The surrounding essence of the world began to surge into his body in a frenzy. On his battle armor, countless demonic patterns appeared, and the violent yuan qi of the universe condensed into a huge storm within his body. With a loud bang, it finally tore apart the binding power of the misty slash. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu's saber had already landed. Divine Lord Luo put his palms together and the power of yin and yang in his palms surged. Even the power of qi and blood surged into his palms and restrained the power of the saber in his hands. However, under the power of the origin returning force that broke the formation, all of it was converted into yin force that drifted in the surroundings, causing the surroundings to be filled with a cold yin qi. With a loud shout, the yin and yang force in Divine Lord Luo's palm was completely detonated, finally neutralizing the power of Chu Xiu's saber. Divine Lord Luo's martial arts style was also extremely fierce and violent. In the heavenly gates, he was also a top-notch warlord. At that moment, instead of retreating, he advanced. The demonic patterns on his battle armor shone, and his entire body was shrouded in an extremely violent aura. His body was like a cannonball, exploding with a loud bang as he rushed toward Chu Xiu. Unparalleled in breaking formations. The power of this saber might not be as sharp as Dugu Weiwei's Listen to the Spring Rain, but it had an additional sense of unparalleled fierceness in breaking formations. Wherever it passed, all the power returned to the origin. Divine Lord Luo was directly swept away by this domineering saber. When the second saber slashed down, Divine Lord Luo crossed his arms in front of him, and a storm gathered in front of him. However, it was completely shattered by this saber into a pile of yin force. The battle armor on his body also shattered with a loud bang. When the third saber slashed down, the saber essence of the break formula slashed out. The saber power had not yet been unleashed, but the saber essence seemed to have already shattered the void. Anything in front of this saber would be accurately sliced in half. After countless divine general rankings, this was the first time that Divine Lord Luo felt so close to death. He did not beg for mercy, nor did he give up. Instead, the blood and qi in his body erupted, and all the blood and qi were attached to his body, forming a blood-refined armor that was completely condensed from blood. At that moment, Divine Lord Luo was already as thin as a mummy. Even though he had risked his life, it was still useless. Although the blood-refined armor was strong, it was directly shattered by the saber essence of Chu Xiu's break formula. Divine Lord Luo was also sent flying dozens of feet away. He fell to the ground and created a huge pit. However, what exceeded Chu Xiu's expectations was that even at such a time, Divine Lord Luo was still alive. It could be said that his vitality was extremely tenacious. Moreover, one had to admit that Divine Lord Luo's fighting spirit was extremely shocking. At that moment, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight, but he still struggled to climb out of the pit and wanted to continue fighting. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "You're just a slightly stronger ant. Why are you still struggling?" Chu Wuji, who was at the back, was extremely satisfied as he watched. Divine Lord Luo had said that to him just now, and in the end, Chu Xiu had returned the same words to him. Just as Chu Xiu was about to finish off Divine Lord Luo with another slash, a voice filled with anger was heard. "Stop!" At the same time, a powerful sword aura shone and headed straight for Chu Xiu. The sword aura that was as red as fire traversed the sky. It was as dazzling as a falling meteor. The facial expressions of Chu Wuji and Mei Qinglian changed instantly. This was the true might of the heaven and earth mysterious realm. Chu Xiu's facial expression changed slightly. He put away his saber and formed a seal. In an instant, boundless demonic aura surged. In mid-air, the heaven and earth weeping blood rain fell, and the demon's roar and wail resounded between heaven and earth. A blood-colored demon's shadow tore through the void and grabbed the powerful sword aura that was like a falling meteor with one hand. In an instant, a huge explosion even shook the surrounding mountains and caused avalanches. Boundless demonic aura and scorching sword aura scattered in all directions. With the might of the devil's heaven and earth weeping great compassion mantra, Chu Xiu barely managed to block the other party's attack. He squinted his eyes. Even among the heaven and earth mysterious realm, the person who attacked was not considered weak. At the very least, he was much stronger than Ling Yunzi. From afar, Diwu Qisong and Lin Sunglong stepped through the air with their powerful vital energy. Seeing that Emperor God Luo was still alive, they heaved a sigh of relief. They did not expect that Emperor God Luo would almost be killed by Chu Xiu in such a short period of time. Was it because Chu Xiu was too strong or Emperor God Luo was too useless? He could not even hold on for such a short period of time. Seeing that Diwu Qisong and Lin Sunglong had arrived, Emperor God Luo also heaved a sigh of relief. Although he was not afraid of death, it did not mean that he did not want to live anymore. Having reinforcements to save him was, of course, the best. However, at that moment, Emperor God Luo did not notice that the power of extreme Yin under his feet was getting thicker and thicker. It even condensed into a layer of frost under his feet. When the power of extreme Yin was condensed to the extreme, a huge wave of world-extinguishing fire directly enveloped Emperor God Luo. In less than 3 breaths' time, Emperor God Luo was completely burned to ashes. Breaking through the formation had turned Emperor God Luo's power into a huge wave of extreme Yin. Although Chu Xiu had not reached the heaven and earth mysterious realm and could command the power in this part of the world at will, he could still use some extreme Yin power to condense into world-extinguishing fire. If Emperor God Luo was at his peak, he could use his own cultivation to resist the burning of world-extinguishing fire. However, Emperor God Luo was now like an arrow at the end of its flight. Even his qi and blood had been completely burned. He no longer had the power to resist the power of world-extinguishing fire. Seeing that Emperor God Luo was burned to ashes in front of them, Diwu Qisong and Lin Sunglong were dumbfounded. They seemed to be in disbelief. "Chu Xiu, you're courting death." Diwu Qisong stared at Chu Xiu. His voice was like thunder. The sky was already filled with dark clouds. Over the years, divine generals of the heavenly gates had died before. After all, the martial world was so big. There were many who could kill divine generals of the heavenly gates and dared to kill them. However, in the past 1,000 years, there were only two people who could kill divine generals of the heavenly gates. One was Dugu Weiwei, and the other was him, Chu Xiu. Huang Shiyue and Emperor God Luo had both died in the hands of Chu Xiu. This was a great humiliation. Chu Xiu said coldly, "Those who dare to come to my Kunlun mountain and behave atrociously are the ones who are courting death. I have no enmity with the heavenly gates, but you keep forcing me. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being ruthless." Diwu Qisong was enraged. Obviously, he was extremely angry. His position in the heavenly gates was like the combination of Chu Xiu's subordinates, Shang Tianliang and Mei Qinglian. He was the kind of person who could manage some chores and was also very good at fighting. Most of the time, Diwu Qisong was still able to maintain absolute rationality. He even dared to advise Jun Wuxian. However, Chu Xiu had killed Emperor God Luo right under his nose. This behavior had completely infuriated Diwu Qisong. With a wave of his hand, a heavy sword burning with raging flames appeared in Diwu Qisong's hand. The heavy sword was as tall as a person and as thick as a door. It was covered with raging flames of magic patterns. Just by looking at it, it gave people a strong sense of oppression. As Diwu Qisong's sword fell, the ground cracked along the path of his sword. Magma gushed out. When it reached in front of Chu Xiu, the power was as hot and fierce as a volcanic eruption. Chu Xiu's ethereal slash fell. The formation breaker sword shone brightly and the power of returning to origin flourished. However, it was still unable to completely dissolve the power of the sword. Around his feet, raging flames suddenly erupted. The power did not contain any impurities. It was just pure heat and explosive power. It was filled with an explosive and destructive aura. Diwu Qisong was much stronger than Ling Yunzi. Even though Chu Xiu tried to resist it, he was still unable to block it. He was engulfed by the boundless raging flames. However, the next moment, the great darkness devil's Dharma form appeared around him. The world-extinguishing flame bloomed. Fighting fire with fire, he finally managed to neutralize the power and escape from it. However, Diwu Qisong followed closely behind. Every time the heavy sword in his hand fell, it was like a falling meteor. The power was so strong and the range was so wide that it was astounding. Chu Xiu only managed to block a few attacks and the great darkness devil's Dharma form had already been shattered. This made Chu Xiu curse in his heart. He seemed to be a little unlucky. His power had just improved a little, but in the end, the enemy he encountered was much stronger. Chapter 1056. With the breaking formation in his hand, Chu Xiu had the guts and confidence to fight head-on against the existence of the heaven and earth elemental realm. However, the problem was that the person he had confidence in was only someone at Ling Yunzi's level, but Ling Yunzi who had yet to obtain the pure yang divine weapon. In the end, a divine general of the Tianmen had popped out and had the power of the heaven and earth elemental realm. Furthermore, he was so strong. This had already exceeded Chu Xiu's expectations. The Tianmen's power seemed to be stronger than he had imagined. After blocking a few moves consecutively, Chu Xiu could no longer hold on. At the same time, he cursed in his heart. He had no idea where Shang Tianliang had run off to. What Tianshan snow lotus? If that could be grown, the pugilistic world would have been flooded with elixirs. Moreover, if you wanted to wait for the Tianshan snow lotus to ripen, you probably wouldn't be able to do it even after Shang Tianliang's lifespan was exhausted. Just as Chu Xiu could no longer hold on and was prepared to lure the fifth scarlet pine to Mount Kunlun to activate the formation that Master Yuan Ji had recently set up to control the rootless sacred flame, which was passed down by the heavenly weeping demon Venerable, to resist the fifth scarlet pine, a storm condensed between the heavens and the earth and transformed into a huge spear that smashed down with a loud bang, forcing the fifth scarlet pine to retreat. Chu Xiu, kid, you're getting weaker and weaker. You can't hold on anymore after such a short while? Shang Tianliang descended from mid-air with two white snow lotuses in his hands. He casually threw them to Chu Wuji. Chu Xiu snorted and said, don't make sarcastic remarks here. This guy is not easy to deal with. The Tianmen Divine General is not weak among the true fire spiritual refinement realm and is not weak among the heaven and earth elemental realm. Shang Tianliang laughed coldly and took a step forward. His body attracted the power of heaven and earth. With a wave of his hand, cold wind whistled in an instant and condensed into sharp blades that swept out with his fist. Looking over, the entire world was enveloped by the terrifying blades. They stretched out for several miles with great power. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes. Shang Tianliang's power had improved slightly during this period of time. This was rather shocking. In fact, the further one progressed, the slower the progress of a martial artist would be. At Chu Xiu's true fire spirit refinement realm, most of the martial artists were actually building up their foundation over time, relying on the accumulation of power to increase their strength. Of course, there were also a few freaks. For example, Qinxing Di relied on self-abuse to temper his body to increase his strength, while Chu Xiu relied on continuous life and death battles to increase his strength. Shang Tianliang was also a freak. He had grown up in Green City, a place with congenital deficiencies. Now, he had returned to his normal state. Every time he fought with someone, his strength would increase a little. Every time he had an epiphany, his strength would increase again. However, Shang Tianliang felt somewhat miserable facing Diwu Qisong. The heavy sword in Diwu Qisong's hand, which was as wide as a door, suddenly slammed down. Behind him, a strange Dharma idol appeared. It was like a demon god, and its entire body was burning with scorching flames. As it made hand seals, the area within a radius of more than 10 miles turned into a boundless fire domain. The scorching flames swallowed the storm of blades. Shang Tianliang's expression changed drastically. He formed a fist seal, and in the blink of an eye, the majestic spiritual energy of heaven and earth condensed into a powerful mountain-like barrier in front of him. Shang Tianliang was as still as a mountain. At this moment, it was as if he had taken root in the ground under his feet. However, when Diwu Qisong's sword slashed down and smashed onto the ground, it caused the ground under their feet to shatter. A large amount of scorching lava gushed out, and directly blasted Shang Tianliang away. Seeing Shang Tianliang retreat in a somewhat sorry state, Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "I already said that this guy is not ordinary. Why are you rushing over so anxiously?" Shang Tianliang's face darkened as he said, "Where did this guy come from? His martial arts are extremely ferocious. It's as if he wants to destroy heaven and earth." Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Of course, the Heavenly Gate's divine general is not weak. His opponent should be one of the top existences among the 9 great divine generals. Let's attack together. If one person could not defeat him, then 2 people would do it." With Chu Xiu's current strength, he indeed had the qualifications to challenge the strongest powerhouses in the heaven and earth mysterious realm. As the breaking formation slashed out, all things returned to their origin. The blade intent of the breaking formula even cut through time and space. The powerful aura seemed as if it could tear the heavens and earth apart. Shang Tianliang's entire body was enveloped in a layer of golden divine light. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth adhered to his body, almost as if it had solidified. His figure melted into the wind, and his speed exploded to the extreme. Then, he burrowed into the ground in a strange and unpredictable manner. When it came to close combat, Shang Tianliang's strength was also rare among those in the heaven and earth mysterious realm. After all, his physical body cultivation was tempered in the cruel environment of Green Metropolis, so it was not inferior to martial artists who specialized in physical body cultivation. As the 2 of them attacked one after another, they finally avoided the situation of being suppressed by Diwu Qisong and started to fight with him. Even Diwu Qisong had to admit that Chu Xiu was indeed very difficult to deal with. It was true that a powerhouse in the heaven and earth mysterious realm could control a part of the world, but they could not directly change the world. The technique that he cultivated was of the fire attribute. If he used it in a snowy place like Kunlun Mountain, he would not be able to unleash his peak power. In the end, Chu Xiu used his breaking formation to slash here and there. He had directly converted most of the power in this part of the world into the power of extreme Yin. This made it even more difficult for him to control the fire attribute power in this part of the world. Lin Sunglong, who was at the side, had not planned to make a move. However, when he saw that Wuxia Xianxia had also fallen into a predicament, he was just about to make a move when he saw Mei Qinglian and Chu Wuji surrounding him. There was also Lu Jianghe, who had arrived at some point in time. Lin Sunglong was not so arrogant to fight against 3 people alone. The main reason was that there was Lu Jianghe on the other side. Lin Sunglong could not see through his cultivation, so he did not dare to act rashly. After fighting for 15 minutes, Wuxia Xianxia's entire body was wrapped in a frost storm, and his power was no longer as strong as before. A large amount of flames erupted from his body, and his figure also merged into the flames. In the blink of an eye, he had already retreated thousands of feet. Looking coldly at Chu Xiu, Wuxia Xianxia said coldly, "Chu Xiu, you're very good. In all these years, the Heavenly Gates has never suffered such a big loss. When the sect leader comes out of seclusion, you don't have to give up this Kunlun mountain. All of you can stay here." Before Chu Xiu could speak, Lu Jianghe sneered and said, "Never suffered such a big loss? Who was the one who was almost slaughtered by the sect leader? If the sect leader had not left you with one breath, would you still have the right to talk nonsense here? You don't know what you're talking about. What's your ranking among the Heavenly Gates divine generals? Number 1? I seem to remember that the guy who was ranked number 1 among the 9 great divine generals of the Heavenly Gates was killed by the sect leader's finger. TSK, that was really tragic. It was like crushing an ant to death." Wuxia Xianxia was so angry at Lu Jianghe that he could not speak. Don't hit people in the face when you hit them, and don't expose their shortcomings when you scold them. Lu Jianghe's words could be said to be specially aimed at slapping people in the face and exposing their shortcomings. Most importantly, Wuxia Xianxia knew his identity. When Dugu Weiwei massacred the Heavenly Gates 500 years ago, he might have been watching from the side. When Lu Jianghe said this, he was more confident than anyone else. The 5th Qi Song pointed at Lu Jianghe. In the end, he did not even say a single word as he left with Lin Sunglong. After Wuxia Xianxia left, the mocking smile on Lu Jianghe's face disappeared. He suddenly sighed and said, "The Heavenly Gates is a little tricky." In the past, he had watched as the Heavenly Gates was almost wiped out by Dugu Weiwei. In the end, only 500 years had passed and the Heavenly Gates had actually grown to such a level. From Lu Jianghe's point of view, the Heavenly Gates now was even stronger than the Heavenly Gates 500 years ago. Lu Jianghe could not tell who was stronger between the sect leader of the Heavenly Gates 500 years ago and Jun Wuxian. Anyway, they were both stronger than him. But the first divine general of the Heavenly Gates in front of him was stronger than the first divine general of the Heavenly Gates 500 years ago. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "It is definitely tricky. But the Heavenly Gates is not invincible in the world. What I am more confused about is, why didn't the sect leader kill everyone in the Heavenly Gates back then? Dugu Weiwei had never been a soft-hearted person. At that time, almost half of the sects in the Jianghu were directly or indirectly destroyed by Dugu Weiwei. Dugu Weiwei naturally knew the principle of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. Therefore, he had deliberately left the Heavenly Gates a chance of survival." Chu Xiu felt that it was strange. Previously, Zhongshanxiu had said that the Heavenly Gates bore great karma. They were the gatekeepers, so they could not be killed. Could it be that the reason Dugu Weiwei had left the Heavenly Gates a chance of survival was also because they were the gatekeepers? What kind of gate were they guarding? There was definitely a hidden reason. The Heavenly Gates guarded West Kunlun all year round. They did not fight for power or profit. Other than fighting for the Heavenly Key, one could not even see a divine general of the Heavenly Gates for many years. With the strength of the Heavenly Gates, it was not a problem to say that they dominated the Jianghu, but at least to become the top supreme sect. But the Heavenly Gates still maintained such a way of doing things. If there was no reason for this, Chu Xiu would definitely not believe it. Lu Jianghe shrugged his shoulders and said, "How would I know about this kind of thing? The sect leader will not tell me what he does. Anyway, there must be a reason. You should worry about how to face the heavenly gates now. You saw the power of that fellow Jun Wuxian in the primitive demon's cave. He was simply unreasonably strong. Chu Xiu suddenly asked, is Jun Wuxian as strong as the 4 great demon lords? Lu Jiang he hesitated for a moment and said, I can't understand their realms, but from what I feel, he should be stronger than the 4 great demon lords. Among the 4 great demon lords, even the strongest battle-martial demon lord was only at the peak of the heaven and earth elemental realm and had not crossed this realm. As for Jun Wuxian, I suspect that he has surpassed the heaven and earth elemental realm and reached another level. Chu Xiu was slightly moved and said, Jun Wuxian's strength is so strong? Then wouldn't he be comparable to the sect leader? Lu Jiang he said disdainfully, he is still trash that can be killed with one slap. The sect leader once said that it was not easy for the Heavenly Gates sect leader 500 years ago to break through the shackles and surpass the heaven and earth elemental realm. In the end, he was slapped by the sect leader and vomited blood. I do not know what kind of world is above the heaven and earth elemental realm. But even in another world, the sect leader is an existence that stands at the peak. Chapter 1057. The matter of Elysium's sudden action was like a haze that brought some pressure to Chu Xiu and the others. However, Chu Xiu had already expected that Elysium would make a move. He just didn't expect that Elysium would act so quickly. Even Elysium himself didn't expect that Divine Lord Luo, that boorish fellow, would suddenly have a whim to wander around and accidentally hear the news of Chu Xiu. As a result, he was ridiculed by others and couldn't help but seek revenge on Chu Xiu. Glancing at Chu Wuji and the others, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, find a time to instruct the Northern Yan's Jinwu Hall and the Eastern Chi's Blue Dragon Society to spread the news that we are rebuilding the Kunlun Devil cult. As for West Chu, ask the Scarlet Devil sect and Umoya to help spread the news and recruit people. During the time that Chu Xiu was in seclusion, the news that he was rebuilding the Kunlun Devil cult had spread throughout the underworld. However, this was only news that spread in the underworld. Chu Xiu and the others didn't add any fuel to the fire. Now that the matter of Elysium brought some pressure to Chu Xiu, they should also take the initiative. There were people of Chu Xiu in Northern Yan, Eastern Qi, and West Chu. He could use them to spread the news and recruit diabolism warriors. Even some non-diabolism warriors could be lured to join. Among the 3 branches of Taoism, Buddhism, and diabolism, Buddhism was naturally the righteous one and had the advantage of reputation. However, everyone knew the rules of Taoism and Buddhism. There were a lot of people in the underworld who didn't want to follow the rules of Taoism and Buddhism, so they chose to join other sections. Now that Chu Xiu had reopened the Kunlun Devil cult, there would presumably be many young warriors with good potential, but they were rebellious. These were the people that Chu Xiu wanted to recruit. They were the ones with real potential and a future. After giving the order, Chu Xiu went into seclusion again. This time, he wasn't going to familiarize himself with his power. Instead, he was going to train himself. Originally, he wanted to develop his strength in peace, but now it seemed that he did not have that much time. In the following months, as the news of Chu Xiu's death spread, a wave of demonic cultivators was set off in Jianghu. Not everyone viewed the devil sects as tigers and wolves. In this pugilistic world, there would always be those who deviated from the orthodoxy and didn't wish to be restricted by the rules of those so-called righteous sections. In fact, they even had a faint admiration for the Kunlun Devil sect from 500 years ago. Who cares about good or evil? In this Jianghu, whoever has the bigger fist has the right. It's just that 500 years ago, the evil path was a bit too strong, so it made the people of Jianghu so afraid. Before the emergence of the Kunlun Devil cult, although Jianghu was also divided into factions, they were not divided into good and evil. Taoists were Taoists, Buddhists were Buddhists, devils were devils, sword factions were sword factions, and aristocratic families were aristocratic families. Now, everyone united together to call themselves the good path and go against the evil path. In fact, this was the sin created by the Kunlun Devil cult 500 years ago. The previous conflict between the good path and the evil path was definitely not this serious. In the past, this group of people was regarded as rude villains. But now, they seemed to have found a direction, and all of them were ready to join the Kunlun devil cult. There were even some sensitive people from some small aristocratic families and small sects who took the initiative to secretly send one of their disciples to the Kunlun devil cult. 500 years seemed like a long time, but the era of the demonic flames was monstrous. Even if it was covered up by some big sects, it was still passed down by word of mouth. In recent years, the Jianghu had been turbulent, and it looked like a storm was brewing. It was estimated that the era of great competition would come very soon. It was almost impossible for these small sects and aristocratic families to continue living in peace. Sometimes, even if you don't look for trouble, trouble will find you. So by doing this, they were actually betting on both sides. They were only secretly sending one disciple to the Kunlun devil cult. In case the evil path gained the upper hand in the future, then they would be one of their own, and they would also be in the limelight. And in the future, if the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed again, and the relationship between them and their disciples was dug out, they could naturally sever their relationship with them. It was also a good way to show their deep sense of righteousness. In any case, these patriarchs and sect leaders definitely had more than one son. Using one of their sons to bet on such a game was very worthwhile. In short, in these few months, the disciples of aristocratic families, the loose cultivators of the evil path, the people of the Jianghu, and all kinds of people and forces were stirred up. The Jianghu seemed to be in a mess. As for the other righteous sects, their search for the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei had reached an impasse. How could they find him? There was no way to find him. Just based on the Jia Xun year, even if they killed all the martial artists born 18 years ago, it would be useless. There might still be fish that slipped through the net. What were the characteristics of the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei? What did he look like? Who knew? Even Su Jing, Xiaomo, Taoism, and a few famous divination grandmasters in the Jianghu gathered a total of 9 people to divine the heaven's fate stone slab together. In the end, all of them suffered a backlash and were seriously injured by the existence of the unseen. This was something that Chu Xiu did not know about, and it was also something that Chu Xiu did not expect. The stone slab was fake, but the 8 words on it were real. The heaven's fate is not defeated, the devil lord does not die. In the past, when Master Yuanji tried to divine Chu Xiu's past, he was seriously injured by the unseen existence's backlash. Now that it was replaced by someone stronger than him, the result was the same. This result caused everyone to believe the news of Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation even more. They put in more effort to investigate, but in the end, it was of no use at all. In the main hall of the Chunyang Dao sect, the people of the 3 great Taoist sects were all there, but at this time, everyone felt very tired, of course, except Zhang Daoling of the Taoist Master's Mansion. Although the Taoist Master's Mansion had also tracked the clues of Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation in the land of West Chu, it was just for show. For the Taoist Master's Mansion, it really did not matter whether Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation appeared in the land of West Chu or not. Anyway, they had been neighbors with Yi Xiaonan, such a big devil, for so long, it was not a big deal to have one more. Ling Yunzi waved his hand tiredly and said, "It's a waste of effort. There are no clues." Lu Changlu shook his head and said, "If we continue to search like this, it will be like looking for a needle in a haystack. If we can find clues, then we are lucky. The Jianghu is in a mess now, so it's better not to search for now. My disciples are almost unable to hold on. If it doesn't work, I will ask His Majesty for help and let him send the power of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court to search. It is undoubtedly more advantageous for the Imperial Court to do this than us. At worst, I will give His Majesty a few ancient books to strengthen the body." Lu Changlu felt a little ashamed when he thought that the authentic Taoist breathing method he gave to Lu Haochang was used as an aphrodisiac by him. But some things using the power of the Imperial Court was undoubtedly more efficient than doing it himself. Ling Yunzi shook his head and said, "Not for now. We can influence the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, but how can we influence the West Chu Imperial Court and the Northern Yan Imperial Court? Zhang Daoling said at this time, the West Chu imperial court can also do it. Although His Majesty stood on the side of the evil path last time, the West Chu imperial court has a good relationship with the Taoist master's mansion. At worst, I will give His Majesty a few cultivation methods to strengthen the body. Our Taoist master's mansion's yin-yang dragon and tiger fusion method is also very famous. Lu Chengliu's face suddenly darkened when he heard this, but he could not get angry because Zhang Daoling really did not mean it. Zhang Daoling's personality was serious and rigid, but he was not teasing Lu Changlu when he said this. He was serious. He really thought that giving a dispensable cultivation method to strengthen the body in exchange for the support of the imperial court was very worth it. And there was nothing to be embarrassed about. The intersection of heaven and earth, the harmony of yin and yang, the convergence of dragon and tiger, this was the yin and yang of heaven and earth. It was the Tao of natural reproduction. Why think so dirty? Ling Yunzi shook his head and said, let's not think about this for now. Now we should think about how to solve the problem with Chu Xiu. If we don't solve this, and we don't find Dugu Weiwei, there will be another evil cult leader in Jianghu. In this period of time, the news of the re-establishment of the Kunlun devil cult had spread to every corner of Jianghu, causing countless people to jump out and dance like devils. From the central plains to West Kunlun, there was an endless stream of warriors on the road. Those evil demons and murderers were like in the Golden Age, fighting to be the first to join the Kunlun devil cult. Chu Xiu was originally just a scabbard, but now he has swept the whole Jianghu. The restoration of the Kunlun devil cult has developed to such a great extent, we can't care about it anymore. Otherwise, when Dugu Weiwei really returns, the Kunlun devil cult's minions will be there waiting for him. Lu Changlu said in a deep voice, Leader Ling Yunzi, do you mean to start another war between the righteous and the evil? Ling Yunzi stood up and said in a deep voice, this is no longer a war between the righteous and the evil, but a war to stop the restoration of the Kunlun devil cult. 500 years ago, we destroyed the Kunlun devil cult, and now less than 500 years later, the evil cult has been restored. This is the shame of the righteous. This time, we should put aside all prejudices, and join forces with the Buddhist sects, the 5 major sword sects, the 9 big families, and other forces belonging to the righteous martial arts world to go to Kunlun to suppress the evil cult. On the side of the real martial arts cult, Lu Changlu and Han Jusi looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Based on Lu Changliu's character, he would not take the lead to do such a thing, but once someone else took the lead, he would also follow. However, on the side of the Taoist master mansion, Zhang Daoling hesitated and said, Leader Ling Yunzi, this is a serious matter, I have to go back and ask the old Taoist master about this. Ling Yunzi frowned and said, not only my Taoism, but all the righteous sects in the world have to participate in this kind of thing. Do you still need to ask for permission? Zhang Daoling nodded and said, although the old Taoist master gave me the power, this kind of thing involves the general situation of the Jianghu. I have to go back to the Taoist master mansion and discuss with the old Taoist master before making a decision. What I am carrying is the future of the entire Taoist master mansion. Forgive me for not easily agreeing. Ling Yunzi nodded, but there was still a hint of displeasure on his face. He had always been dissatisfied with the actions of the Taoist master mansion. Chapter 1058. Ling Yunzi's dissatisfaction with the Taoist master mansion was actually his dissatisfaction with the old Taoist master. In the eyes of other people, the old Taoist master was highly respected and was a famous figure in Jianghu, but in Ling Yunzi's view, it was not the case. Of course, there was no interest or jealousy in this. Ling Yunzi was just dissatisfied with the attitude of the Taoist master mansion as the leader of the righteous path. Before Ling Yunzi stepped into the heaven and earth mystic state, who was the leader of Taoism? It was the Taoist master mansion, the old Taoist master. As a result, for so many years, the Taoist master mansion had always been in a corner of West Chu. Although the Taoist master mansion did not do anything too excessive, they did not do anything beneficial to the situation of the righteous path in Jianghu. Needless to say, the old Taoist master's strength. Although he was more than 500 years old, his combat power was still there. Although he was slightly at a disadvantage in the last battle with Yi Shaonan, it was not a great defeat. This was enough to prove the horror of the old Taoist master. As a result, the old Taoist master had such strength, but he did not retreat, nor did he lead Taoism or the entire righteous path to suppress diabolism. Instead, he built a small courtyard in Dragon Tiger Mountain and spent his days basking in the sun. This made Ling Yunzi somewhat dissatisfied. In his position, not doing anything was a sin in itself. Of course, in the eyes of others, the Taoist master mansion had such power, and the old Taoist master had such strength, but he did not do things too overbearingly. This was already good enough. He could be called a respected martial arts legend. At present, the expectations of the people in Jianghu for those powerhouses had been reduced to the lowest level. As long as they did not come out to cause trouble, then they were good people. On the side of Chunyang Dao's sect, although Ling Yunzi was a little dissatisfied with the reaction of the Taoist master mansion, he did not have the qualifications and strength to order the Taoist master mansion. He could only let Zhang Daoling go back for the time being and ask the old Taoist master before making a decision. On the cliff of the back mountain of Dragon Tiger Mountain, next to the small hut, the old Taoist master was still lying on the bamboo chair basking in the sun. Sometimes, he might spend the whole day basking in the sun. Zhang Qingzhen, on the other hand, sat cross-legged beside the old heavenly master and cultivated. His cultivation didn't seem to have increased at all. It was even the same as when he had just broken through to the real pellet state, but the aura on his body was extremely solid. There was even an inexplicable aura lingering around him. The old celestial master picked up the teapot and took a sip of tea. He glanced at Zhang Qingzhen with a look of approval in his eyes. He thought highly of Zhang Qingzhen, but what he valued about Zhang Qingzhen was not his strength, but his patience. In the past, Zhang Qingzhen was the number one person of the younger generation. Who didn't know the name Little Celestial Master? However, the people of Jianghu are always forgetful. If you don't appear in their eyes for a few years, they will forget about you. In Zhang Qingzhen's generation, Chu Xiu had become a demon lord who stirred up the Jianghu. Although he was only in the true fire spiritual refinement state, his influence was comparable to the powerhouses on the sovereign ranking. As the master of the Kunlun devil cult, was he not considered a supreme figure in the world? Junior Marquis Lu Fengxian became famous after the battle in Wei County. Even now, no one called Lu Fengxian Junior Marquis Lu Fengxian. Instead, they called her unparalleled Marquis Lu Fengxian. The great demon god Lu Fengxian was unparalleled in the world, and the future Lu Fengxian was also unparalleled. There was also the wisdom ruler of the Great Light Temple, Zongxian. Although Zongxian had not appeared in the Jianghu for a long time, he had written his wisdom ruler seal into a book, which became one of the books enshrined in the Sutra library. From then on, the disciples of the Great Light Temple would never forget the name Zongxian. Moreover, it was said that Zongxian was about to break through to the true fire spiritual refinement state. It was even said that Su Ci once said that if Zongxian could step into the true fire spiritual refinement state, he would add another martial arts courtyard to the foundation of the Great Light Temple's 6 martial arts courtyards. It would be called the Wisdom Courtyard, and Zongxian would be the head. It should be known that the founders of the Great Light Temple's 6 martial arts courtyards and 3 meditation halls were all outstanding figures who could develop a branch of Buddhism on their own. Now that Su Ci was preparing to open the 7th martial arts courtyard, it was obvious that he was comparing Zongxian to the ancestors of the Great Light Temple. He believed that Zongxian was qualified to open a branch of Buddhism. These outstanding figures of the past had become famous in the martial world. Their names might not be immortalized, but at the very least, the martial world would not forget their names in the future. However, Zhang Qingzhen, who was ranked first on the Longhu leaderboard in the past, was able to sit at the peak of Longhu Mountain for close to 10 years, accompanying the old man to bask in the sun. If it were anyone else, they would have been unable to endure it. However, Zhang Qingzhen's heart remained the same. His patience was what the old celestial master valued. In the past, the old man was not even as good as Zhang Qingzhen. In the end, he could still lie here and bask in the sun until the very end. However, the graves of his enemies and old friends had trees that were dozens of feet tall, let alone grass. The old celestial master lay down again and said slowly, "Endure it. We have a long life ahead of us. If we can't fight for a moment, we can fight for a lifetime, right?" However, at that moment, the old celestial master suddenly opened his eyes. His body subconsciously emitted a sharp gleam that even startled Zhang Qingzhen, who was meditating at the side. "What's wrong, old celestial master?" The old celestial master shook his head and an imperceptible smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "An interesting young fellow has come to visit. He's an old friend of yours. He doesn't come with good intentions. Why would he come to my celestial master manor at a time like this? Isn't he afraid that I'll disregard my reputation and make him stay here? Speaking of which, I've been disgraced for hundreds of years. Where would I find my reputation?" Although Zhang Qingzhen did not know what the old celestial master meant, he still cautiously reminded him, "Your reputation is Longhu Mountain's reputation. You mustn't lose it." At that moment, at the foot of Longhu Mountain, Chu Xiu's black robes fluttered in the wind. His saber was sheathed at his waist. The scabbard was made of beautiful purple gold inlaid with jade. Mei Qinglian had chosen it for him. That outfit, coupled with Chu Xiu's youthful appearance, made him look like a young warrior who had just stepped out into the world. Of course, he had to ignore the few young Daoists from the Celestial Master Manor who looked like they were facing a great enemy. Chu Xiu came to the Celestial Master Manor alone. After receiving the news that Ling Yunzi was preparing to unite the world's righteous path to destroy the Kunlun devil cult, Chu Xiu came to West Chu first. Ling Yunzi's reputation was simply too huge. Don't forget that there were still many disciples from aristocratic families in the Kunlun demon sect. When they came to join the Kunlun demon sect, they had also brought this piece of news with them. Chu Xiu did not have the habit of waiting for death. He was used to taking the initiative and had even made several preparations. This time, Chu Xiu came to West Chu to complete two things. One was to convince the Celestial Master Manor not to take action, and the other was to convince the moon-worshipping cult to take action. Chu Xiu had come to Mount Longhu to meet the old Celestial Master, not mainly to convince the Celestial Master's mansion. Instead, he simply wanted to meet the old Celestial Master and see if the old Celestial Master could recognize him. Previously, Lu Jianghu said that his current appearance was exactly the same as Dugu Weiwei's Earth Soul incarnation, but he did not have any aura that belonged to Dugu Weiwei. Although Lu Jianghu was unreliable, Chu Xiu still believed in him. After all, Lu Jianghu had followed Dugu Weiwei for so many years. Although he was not as close as the four great demon ancestors, he was still a core figure of the Kunlun devil cult. He would not be wrong about Dugu Weiwei's aura. 500 years ago, besides Lu Jianghu, there was only the old celestial master who was from the same era as Dugu Weiwei. So this time, when he went to the Celestial Master Manor, Chu Xiu wanted to see if he could find any clues from the old Celestial Master. As for the positions of both sides, Chu Xiu was not worried. For so many years, the old Celestial Master had been ruling by doing nothing. Since more than 100 years ago, he had not been involved in anything. His attitude towards the demonic Dao martial artists was not as fierce as that of the Great Light Temple or the Chunyang Dao sect. Of course, with Chu Xiu's suspicious character, even if the old Celestial Master behaved peacefully, he would not completely trust him. But with Chu Xiu's current strength, if the old Celestial Master really turned against him, he could still escape even if he could not win. Moreover, even if he could not escape, Chu Xiu still had a trump card. The mark that Zhong Xinxiu had left for him was still there. Of course, this was only the worst-case scenario. Chu Xiu did not intend to use this trump card until the most critical moment. Moreover, although Zhong Xinxiu was strong to the point that Chu Xiu could not understand, Chu Xiu did not forget that this guy seemed to have a poor sense of direction. Not long after entering the primitive devil cave, he had to go back the way he came. Yet, he still got lost. If he activated the mark and Zhong Xinxiu got lost, Chu Xiu would be in a difficult position. After clearing these messy thoughts, Chu Xiu smiled brightly at the few young Taoist priests in front of him, who looked as if they were facing a great enemy. don't be nervous. I'm just here to visit the old celestial master. The few young Taoist priests who were guarding the door looked as if they would not believe him. Recently, the most famous person in the pugilistic world was undoubtedly Chu Xiu. He had led the Yinma clan back to Kunlun. Before going to Kunlun, he had ruthlessly killed all of his own people. He was vicious and merciless. If he did this to his own people, then there was no need to talk about others. The banner of the Kunlun devil cult was raised. Although Chu Xiu had not yet reached the heaven and earth mysterious realm, he already had the power and influence of a supreme martial artist. Of course, in the eyes of most of the martial artists of the righteous sects, this was not power and influence, but a fierce demonic power. In this pugilistic world, another great demon had appeared. Now, this great demon who was in the limelight of the pugilistic world had suddenly appeared in their Dragon Tiger Mountain. Who would dare believe that he was only here to visit the old celestial master? Seeing the appearance of these young Taoist priests, Chu Xiu could not help but shake his head. Dragon Tiger Mountain had been peaceful for too long. How could this disciple make a fuss over nothing? He had no self-control. Ignoring them, Chu Xiu directly said in a deep voice, "Kunlun's Chu Xiu pays his respects to the old celestial master." Chu Xiu's voice was like the roar of a dragon and a tiger. With a trace of the rhythm of heaven and earth and a trace of sharpness, it resounded throughout the entire Dragon Tiger Mountain. In an instant, all the Taoist priests of Dragon Tiger Mountain were alarmed. They looked down the mountain in shock. At this moment, an old voice came from the peak of the mountain. "Invite official Chu up. Be polite. Don't let outsiders say that Dragon Tiger Mountain does not know the rules." Chapter 1059. It was Chu Xiu's first time meeting the famous old celestial master. If he could only describe the old celestial master with one word, it would be old. His hair and beard were all white, and his face was full of wrinkles. He wore a loose gray Taoist robe and reclined lazily on a bamboo chair. He looked just like an old man from a farmer's family, and he even gave off a benevolent vibe. Of course, if one thought that the old celestial master was a benevolent old man, it would only prove that one was very naive. The old celestial master was currently enjoying his retirement in the back mountain of Mount Longhu. However, when the old celestial master was in charge of the celestial master abode, his reputation was not just for show. Instead, it was because of thunder. Chu Xiu had wanted to see if the old celestial master had any impression of his current appearance. However, after seeing the old celestial master, Chu Xiu was a little disappointed. The old celestial master probably did not recognize him. The old celestial master looked at Chu Xiu, sizing him up. He wasn't surprised. Chu Xiu thought about it and felt relieved. 500 years ago, the old celestial master was just an ordinary disciple of the celestial master abode. He was just a young Taoist priest, not a young one. At that time, there were many talents and powerhouses everywhere, so he was not famous. It was unknown if he had even seen Dugu Weiwei. Of course, the old celestial master said that he had seen Dugu Weiwei and that there was nothing special about Dugu Weiwei, who only had a nose and 2 eyes. To others, it seemed like he was bragging. However, the old celestial master was the only martial artist who had survived that era. Even if he was bragging, no one would know. The old celestial master's name was Zhang Yenyuan. Chu Xiu had asked Lujiang River if he had heard of this name before. Lujiang River's answer was no. At that time, the few powerhouses of Mount Longhu did not have this name. Clearly, the old celestial master was a nobody back then. Chu Xiu and old celestial master looked at each other for a long time before Chu Xiu cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, old celestial master." Glancing at Zhang Qingjin, Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Brother Zhang, long time no see." Zhang Qingjin said with an indifferent expression, "A day in the cave is 1,000 years in the world." For cultivators, time is only divided into the period before and after comprehending the Tao. There is no difference in the length of time. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Since when did Zhang Qingjin learn to be tactful? Was he infected by those monks? The old heavenly master glanced at Zhang Qingzhen. If you have something to say, just say it. If you have something to say, just say it. If you have something to say, just say it. You don't have anything to do with this kid, and you've even forgotten the last time you met him. Don't beat around the bush. Don't learn from those bald donkeys. The elderly celestial master had spoken so bluntly that even Zhang Qingzhen, who had always been calm, felt a little awkward. Old celestial master turned to look at Chu Xiu and narrowed his eyes. Devil Lord Official Chu. In front of old celestial master, no one dares to address themselves as Sir, Chu Xiu said. Old celestial master slowly straightened his back and stared at Chu Xiu. You should know your current status and reputation in the pugilistic world. Aren't you afraid that I'll make you stay here by coming to my celestial master abode at a time like this? Don't think that I'll care about my reputation of bullying the weak. I'm already so old. So what if I'm embarrassed? I can't bring it underground anyway. Chu Xiu shook his head. I believe you won't do that, old celestial master. A look of interest appeared on the old celestial master's face. Oh. You know, but I don't even know if I'll do it. Chu Xiu said calmly, all these years, I've been doing things in the celestial master abode. I've never sought to make any mistakes. I've always been very stable. Old celestial master, you won't make a move unless you're 100% confident that you can keep me here and resist the holy sect's revenge. The old celestial master suddenly rose to his feet. The benevolent expression on his face suddenly disappeared, and a powerful aura was released around him. In an instant, wind and lightning surged, forming a deafening thunderstorm in the air. Are you saying that I won't be able to make you stay even if I try my best? Do you really think so little of me? Chu Xiu's expression didn't change at all. He still looked calm. I'm not looking down on you, old celestial master. I'm just confident in myself. Old celestial master's aura suddenly disappeared. It was as if the thunderstorm was just an illusion. Young man, you have guts. But you didn't take such a risk to come up Dragon Tiger Mountain just to see me, did you? Old celestial master lay back on his bamboo chair and returned to his old and frail appearance. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I don't want to keep you in suspense, old celestial master. I'm here for one thing. The news of Ling Yunzi gathering all the righteous Dao sects to destroy the Kunlun devil cult has spread throughout the world. Your sect's Taoist Zhang Daoling will probably be back soon. That's why I just want celestial master abode to stay out of this. Old celestial master looked at Chu Xiu strangely. I'm righteous, and you're the devil. This matter was brought up by the Chunyang Dao sect, and all the righteous Dao sects in the world agreed. Celestial master abode is also a righteous Dao sect, and we're the leader of the Dao sections. How dare you persuade us not to make a move? Isn't this a joke? But what good will it do to the celestial master abode if we make a move? Chu Xiu sat in front of old celestial master and poured himself a cup of tea from old celestial master's teapot. He said plainly, the Dao sects aren't suitable for doing things that are too radical, but the Chunyang Dao sect is an exception. As the sect master, although Ling Yunzi is rational enough, his personality is much more radical than other Dao martial artists. Ling Yunzi can't see it, but you should be able to, old celestial master. Me rebuilding the Kunlun devil cult and gathering all the fiendish Dao martial artists to the Kunlun mountain is actually beneficial to the situation in the world. The news of Patriarch Dugu's reincarnation has spread, and the pugilistic world is bound to be full of devils and all sorts of evil spirits. But looking at the current pugilistic world, it's just that the momentum is a little bigger. I've recruited people from all sides into the Kunlun devil cult in exchange for peace in the pugilistic world. If Ling Yunzi wants to start a war again, I'll accompany him to the end. But in fact, the Central Plains warriors are the ones suffering. Old Celestial Master said with a faint smile, so you're saying that you built the Kunlun devil cult for the sake of the Central Plains warriors? Chu Xiu shook his head. Of course I don't think so. But as long as the sect master doesn't appear, the orthodox Dao and the fiendish Dao can still maintain this balance. It's a good thing for everyone. Of course, now that Ling Yunzi wants to start a war, the Kunlun devil cult will naturally accompany him to the end. I think that even if you know the news, old celestial master, you probably won't make a move this time. Oh. Why do you know this old man so well? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I've said it before. All these years, old celestial master, you've never done anything radical. If you weren't 100% confident, you'd never make a move. The moon-worshipping cult is in West Chu, not far from the celestial master's abode. If the celestial master's abode can accommodate Yi Shaonan, why can't they accommodate me, Chu Xiu? Old celestial master glared at him. Since that's the case, why did you come to the celestial master's abode when you're certain that I won't make a move? Isn't this unnecessary? Aren't you afraid that I'll go to the Kunlun mountain to cause trouble for you if you anger me? Chu Xiu shook his head. I'm certain that you won't make a move, but you're not the only person in charge of the celestial master's abode. I just don't want to see the celestial master's abode being bewitched by others. Old celestial master stroked the beard on his chin. The way he looked at Chu Xiu was a little strange. If Chu Xiu wasn't bluffing, then his control over people's hearts was really amazing. Most importantly, how old was he? Old celestial master knew that age didn't mean everything. Some people were still stupid even after living their whole lives. However, old celestial master couldn't help but be surprised when he saw a young man stirring up such a storm. Old celestial master subconsciously glanced at Zhang Qingjin. Fortunately, Zhang Qingjin didn't feel jealous or depressed. His Taoist heart was still stable. Zhang Qingjin had his own path to walk. No matter how impressive Chu Xiu was, it wasn't a path he wanted to walk. At that moment, someone pushed open the door to old celestial master's courtyard. Zhang Daoling hurried in. When he saw Chu Xiu, he was shocked. He pointed at Chu Xiu, so shocked that he couldn't speak. In his own sect, Zhang Daoling naturally wouldn't put his perception to the maximum. So he only sensed that there was someone in old celestial master's courtyard. He thought it was just another disciple coming to ask old celestial master about martial arts. He didn't expect it to be Chu Xiu. At that moment, Zhang Daoling didn't know what to say. Leave Chu Xiu here? It seemed like he came back to celestial master's abode to ask this question. Was he supposed to greet Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu looked at old celestial master and smiled. Look, there's someone with a different opinion. I think priest Zhang must have brought the attitude of Chunyang Dao sect. But I believe that old celestial master will make the right choice. I won't disturb you anymore. Old celestial master nodded and said slowly, you don't plan to stay and have a taste of my vegetarian food? Chu Xiu shook his head. An inexplicable smile appeared on his lips. It had a hint of blood in it. No, I like to eat meat. After Chu Xiu left the mountain, Zhang Daoling frowned and asked, Old celestial master, what is Chu Xiu doing here? Old celestial master said impatiently, he's doing what you're doing here. Why is the alliance of the orthodox sects that you and Ling Yunzi made like a sieve? There are holes everywhere. You haven't even made a move yet, but they've already received the news. Why, do you have to be polite before killing? I'm going to draw my sword. Are you ready? Old celestial master shook his head. The warriors of this generation had not experienced troubled times. Their methods were a little primitive. Chapter 1060. In the eyes of the outside world, Zhang Daoling was the dignified and just person in charge of the Taoist master's residence. But in front of the old Taoist master, he was just like the little Taoist boy back then. Even when he was reprimanded by the old Taoist master, he did not say a word. In fact, this matter really had nothing to do with him. It was the Chunyang Dao sect's carelessness that leaked the news to those small forces. Who knew if they had spies from the diabolism or something like that? But Zhang Daoling did not refute. He only said in a low voice, then, Old Taoist master, should we make a move this time or not? The old Taoist master sighed and said, what's there to make a move for? Chu Xiu has already come to us. Look at his attitude, he is fearless. Does he look like he is afraid? What if he is bluffing? The old Taoist master squinted and said, although I am old, I am not to the point of being blind. Even if this kid's acting is good, and he is bluffing, and even deceiving me, it is not a big deal. This time, with so many sects making a move, with the momentum of the Chunyang Dao sect, the Jianghu sect, the Great Light Temple, and the Sabodhi Temple, do you think they are afraid of me? Afraid of the Taoist master's residence? Whether or not the Taoist master's residence goes or not, it will not play the most crucial role. The last straw that breaks the camel's back is not the Taoist master's residence. Zhang Daoling said, if Chu Xiu cannot hold on and the diabolism is destroyed, but the Taoist master's residence did not make a move in this battle, will it affect the reputation of the Taoist master's residence? The old Taoist master scolded, idiot. Can't you bring a group of people to lie in ambush around Kunlun Mountain? If Chu Xiu can hold on, you can take it as you bringing people to the west to enjoy the scenery. If Chu Xiu cannot hold on, you can follow him to Kunlun Mountain and clean up the mess. Anyway, as long as you appear, who cares if you contribute or not? Zhang Daoling was stunned. He hesitated and said, but if that's the case, isn't the Taoist master's residence stealing the credit? You obviously didn't do anything, but in the end, you want to share the fame. The old celestial master sighed and shook his head. Dao Ling, you've managed the celestial master mansion very well all these years. Even when I was in charge of the celestial master mansion, I didn't do as well as you did. But do you know why I still haven't handed over all the power of the celestial master mansion to you after so many years? Zhang Daoling lowered his head and said, I did not do well enough. I did not meet your expectations. The old celestial master shook his head. No, you're very outstanding, but you're too outstanding. I'm not handing over the authority of the celestial master's mansion to you because you're not shameless enough. Zhang Daoling looked up at the old celestial master in shock. The old celestial master said, in the martial world, if you don't take advantage of others, you'll be at a disadvantage. You want to save face, so you can't go too far. If you don't suffer, who will? Other people would only talk about face after getting the benefits, but you, on the other hand, didn't even see the shadow of the benefits and you're already talking about face. I've lived for 500 years. I've seen Taoism, Buddhism, Taoism, and I've seen all the major forces in the world. I was there when diabolism was glorious. I was there when Taoism was glorious. I was there when Buddhism was glorious. I don't care if it's good, evil, Taoism, or fiend. Remember, you're just a member of the Celestial Master Mansion. The reason why the elders impart their knowledge and answer their doubts is because they want to see their descendants grow up safely. As he spoke, the old Celestial Master patted Zhang Qingzhen's shoulder. Looking at Zhang Daoling, the old Celestial Master said in a deep voice, when you realize that in your heart, the safety of the sect is more important than anything else, more important than your so-called reputation, more important than your own face, then I can rest assured and truly hand over this position to you. Zhang Daoling nodded and left, deep in thought. After Zhang Daoling left, Zhang Qingzhen suddenly said, Father, he's also thinking about the Celestial Master Mansion. The old Celestial Master turned his head and looked at Zhang Qingzhen with a faint smile. You finally know how to care about your old man at a time like this? Don't worry, of course I know he's thinking about the Celestial Master Mansion. But Zhang Daoling still needs more training. Zhang Qingzhen suddenly asked, then how did the previous generation Celestial Master train you, old Celestial Master? The old Celestial Master was stunned and smiled, I didn't need to train. Because in that era, whether you wanted your life or your face was a very good choice. After walking out of the Celestial Master Mansion, Chu Xiu looked back at Dragon Tiger Mountain. Only now did he understand why the Celestial Master Mansion could still be the leader of Taoism even though it did not have the deep foundation and long history of the Chunyang Dao sect, and did not have a stunning figure like Ning Xuanji from the real martial sect. The old Celestial Master was famous in the pugilistic world. He could see more clearly and further than anyone else. Some people lived for hundreds of years, but it was just a waste of time. But the old celestial master really lived and understood. As long as he was there, the celestial master mansion might not be able to be the supreme in the world, but at least they would never fall behind and would not have to worry about the extinction of their inheritance. After leaving the celestial master mansion, Chu Xiu still had to go to the moon-worshipping cult. There was a conflict of interest between the bright devil and the hidden devil. When the hidden devil lineage was weak, both sides were suppressed by the righteous martial arts world. In fact, they could still join forces. But now Chu Xiu led the hidden devil lineage back to Kunlun and established the devil cult. In the eyes of others, this was against the moon-worshipping cult. It was impossible for the two sides to join forces. But in fact, Chu Xiu was confident that he could persuade Yi Xiaonan to help. The reason was very simple. It was because the master of the moon-worshipping cult was Yi Xiaonan. When the moon-worshipping cult heard the news that Chu Xiu had come to see them, almost everyone was stunned. Chu Xiu was now in the limelight in the pugilistic world. At the same time, he had attracted the fear of countless righteous forces. They were even preparing to attack West Kunlun. What was he doing here? Now that Chu Xiu's identity was here, Eastern Emperor Tai, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult, and the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult welcomed Chu Xiu together. The holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult teased, "Great cult master Chu, how does it feel to be the cult master of the devil cult?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I can hear a hint of ridicule in your tone. Although I now occupy the Kunlun devil cult, I guess most of the people in the pugilistic world, even the people of the devil path, do not think that I am the cult master of the devil cult. I am only the master of the Kunlun devil cult. Only the name of Lord Dugu Weiwei is worthy of this title." Eastern Emperor Tai and the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. This Chu Xiu actually knew what he was doing. But since he knew this, he still dared to occupy the Kunlun devil cult and call himself the devil master. "Weren't you afraid that Dugu Weiwei would cause trouble for you after he reincarnated?" Right now, the relationship between the two sides was a bit delicate, so only the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult would say such teasing words without any scruples. Eastern Emperor Tai and the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult looked serious. After seeing Yi Xiaonan, Chu Xiu subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Last time in the primitive devil cave, Yi Xiaonan had obtained the demon seed. Now it seemed that even if he had not completely refined the demon seed, he had almost refined it. At this time, the aura around Yi Xiaonan had become indescribable, because Chu Xiu could not even feel Yi Xiaonan's existence. Yi Xiaonan was clearly standing there, but as long as Chu Xiu closed his eyes, he wouldn't be able to sense that there was someone in front of him. However, he could sense a terrifying existence that was as dazzling as the bright moon in the sky. Seeing that Chu Xiu had come looking for him, Yi Xiaonan just said lightly, "What's the matter?" This was Yi Xiaonan's style, so Chu Xiu said directly, "The righteous path of martial arts is preparing to join forces to flatten Kunlun. I want to ask the moon-worshipping cult and sect Master Yi to help." As soon as this was said, Eastern Emperor Tai said directly, "Impossible." Although Eastern Emperor Tai appreciated Chu Xiu very much, and they had worked together many times before, he would never choose to stand on Chu Xiu's side this time. From the moment Chu Xiu chose to occupy the Kunlun mountain and rebuild the Kunlun devil cult, the relationship between the moon-worshipping cult and Chu Xiu had become antagonistic. For the moon-worshipping cult, the threat of Chu Xiu was even equal to that of the righteous path of martial arts. The high priest of the moon-worshipping cult sneered and said, "Official Chu has a shrewd plan. It was you who caused the righteous path of martial arts to besiege you in a high-profile manner, but now you have dragged the moon-worshipping cult into the water. What can we get if the moon-worshipping cult makes a move? In the end, it's all for naught. In the end, the one who benefits is you, Chu Xiu." Chu Xiu asked the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult, "May I ask the high priest, who is stronger between the moon-worshipping cult and the Kunlun devil cult now? Who will be stronger and who will be weaker in the future?" The high priest of the moon-worshipping cult said proudly, "Of course the moon-worshipping cult is stronger. The cult master alone can fight against the strongest in the world." Dong Wang Tai curled his lips disdainfully. Previously, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult always said that he was flattering the cult master. Now, aren't you also flattering him? However, when it came to the future, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult paused. He really didn't dare to say the future because how long had it been since Chu Xiu rose to power? Even if Yi Xiaonan was present and the moon-worshipping cult was strong, who could say for sure in the future? After all, the speed of Chu Xiu's rise was too terrifying. However, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult still said stubbornly, even in the future, with the current situation of the moon-worshipping cult, we will definitely not be weak. Chu Xiu spread his hands and said, since the high priest is so confident in the future of the moon-worshipping cult, why are you afraid to help me? You should know that the Kunlun devil cult is now a thorn in the side of the righteous path. If they can't find the reincarnation of the cult master, they will turn their attention to me. Isn't it a good thing for the moon-worshipping cult to be able to attract the attention of all the righteous sects? Why are you resisting, high priest? The high priest of the moon-worshipping cult was speechless. When it came to sharp-tongued, he, who only knew how to study Gu curse techniques in the moon-worshipping cult, was really not as good as Chu Xiu, who was always arguing with people. Just when Dong Wang Tai wanted to say something more, Chu Xiu looked at Yi Xiaonan and said, actually, after saying so much, the moon-worshipping cult has no reason to make a move. However, I have something here that I think Cult Master Yi will be very interested in. I killed another divine general of Elysium. I am afraid that Jun Wuxian will also make a move. Cult Master Yi, are you interested in watching? Chapter 1061. The fact that Chu Xiu had killed Divine Lord Luo was only known to some people within the Kunlun devil cult. The outside world did not know, but Dong Huang Tai also knew that Chu Xiu would not lie to them about this kind of thing. But after just hearing the news, they still could not help but be shocked. What did he mean by killing another Elysium divine general? Chu Xiu's tone was as if he was saying that he had killed a cat or a dog, which made people extremely uncomfortable. But what was more surprising was Yi Xiaonan. Hearing the news that Chu Xiu said that Jun Wuxian would also go, Yi Xiaonan only thought for less than 3 breaths of time, then nodded and said, yes, I will go. Dong Wang Tai and the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult still wanted to say something, but Yi Xiaonan waved his hand and stopped them. This made both of them speechless. The decision made by the cult leader was obviously not something they could stop. Chu Xiu smiled and said, in that case, I will wait for cult leader Ye's arrival at Kunlun Mountain. After saying that, Chu Xiu left directly, leaving behind Dong Wang Tai and the others with a helpless look. In fact, when they heard Chu Xiu say the name Jun Wuxian, Dong Wang Tai and the others already knew that they could not stop Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan, the famous great demon of Jianghu, was actually very pure. At least in terms of his attitude towards martial arts, he was purer than anyone else. According to Chu Xiu's analysis, Yi Xiaonan should have almost reached the peak of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. He was not inferior to even the 4 great demon lords of the past, and might even be stronger than them. For the current Yi Xiaonan, he estimated that he would also try to break through the mysterious realm above the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Now in Jianghu, there were only 2 people who had reached this realm. One was Zhong Xinxiu, and the other was Jun Wuxian. If Jun Wuxian made a move again, Yi Xiaonan would definitely be interested. Even Chu Xiu suspected that if Yi Xiaonan was really stuck at this juncture and encountered a bottleneck that could not be broken through, would he go to West Kunlun to find Jun Wuxian to exchange pointers? At this time, on the side of the Righteous Alliance, when Chu Xiu had returned to Kunlun Mountain, they had finished assembling and were ready to go to Kunlun to destroy the devil cult. Northern Yan, Western Chu, and Eastern Qi. Almost all of the righteous warriors of these 3 places had gathered. Even those who had not wanted to come before were forced to come by the general trend. Taoist Master Fu was, who had the Taoist warriors of Yan Tian, who, and Taoist sect warriors of Qi, and Zhou Zhou, and Kingdom, and had the sect warriors of Jianghu. Have. Almost all the elites of the righteous path in the Jianghu, numbering more than 100,000 people, were gathered at the foot of Mount Kunlun. When warriors of this scale joined forces to attack, none of the three great countries could resist. The power was simply terrifying. But although their power was strong and there were many of them, when they stood at the foot of Kunlun Mountain, facing the mountain range that stretched for thousands of miles like a giant dragon, they could still feel how small they were. Looking at the empty dragon gate that Chu Xiu had abandoned, Ling Yunzi suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. In the past, the ancestors of the Chunyang Dao sect, or rather, the ancestors of the entire righteous martial world, had crossed this pass and destroyed the Kunlun devil cult, in exchange for 500 years of peace in the martial world. Now, they had to walk the path that their ancestors had once walked, to deal with enemies as difficult as their ancestors. This was really like a reincarnation. Fate made fools of people. The people of the Taoist master mansion did not come? Ling Yunzi suddenly asked. Lu Changlu shook his head and said, there was no news from Zhang Daoling after he returned. Obviously, the Taoist master mansion did not plan to participate in this matter. Ling Yunzi sighed and said, the old Taoist master is old and only wants to lead the Taoist master mansion to stay in Western Chu. He only cares about his own interests and does not care about the safety of the righteous alliance. Such behavior is a bit disappointing. Lu Changlu was a kind man. He smiled bitterly and said, it is not necessary. Everyone has their own fate. For so many years, the Taoist master mansion has been suppressing the moon-worshipping cult in Western Chu. Without the Taoist master mansion, the Central Plains warriors would not be able to resist the power of the moon-worshipping cult. Ling Yunzi waved his hand and said, okay, no need to say more. After this battle, the Jianghu will judge our reputation. Looking at the Kunlun mountain, Ling Yunzi shouted in a deep voice, climb the mountain. Kill the demon. The group of righteous sex martial artists also followed and shouted, exterminate the demons. At the peak of the Kunlun mountain, Chu Xiu and the other warriors of the Yinma clan looked at the warriors who were climbing the mountain aggressively with boundless killing intent. A cold light flashed in their eyes. Lu Jianghu stood beside Chu Xiu, but his thoughts had flown to who knows where. In the past, when the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed, Lu Jianghu did not participate. At that time, he was still sealed in the blood soul bead. After he was resurrected, he learned some details of the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult through other channels, but not much. In the end, the righteous alliance won. Therefore, the various details of the battle were deliberately covered up. It seemed that they did not want others to know that the Kunlun devil cult was still strong without Dugu Weiwei, and that they had suffered heavy casualties and so on. Chu Xiu, boy, are you confident? This time, just the number of heaven and earth profound understanding supreme experts alone will not be small. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, who dares to say that they are confident in facing this kind of power? Life and death, success or failure, all depends on the will of heaven. Why, are you afraid? Lu Jianghu curled his lips and said, why would I be afraid? Lu Jianghu was not afraid, but it did not mean that other people in the Kunlun devil cult were not afraid. The Kunlun devil cult now had tens of thousands of disciples. Half of them were the elite disciples of the Zhenwu Hall and the Yinma clan under Chu Xiu, and the other half joined later. Among these people, there were devil path warriors, rogue cultivators, and some aristocratic families' disciples who were thrown in by their elders. They had not followed Chu Xiu on expeditions and dealt with all kinds of difficulties. Therefore, at this time, they were naturally very hesitant. Chu Xiu did not care about these warriors. They were not the protagonists of this battle. They might not even have the chance to make a move. As long as they could survive this time, even if they did not make a move, there would be enough changes in their mentality. Looking down, the warriors of the righteous sects almost occupied the entire mountain road. They were like a long dragon, completely blocking the only way out of the Kunlun mountain. Originally, the Kunlun mountain still had a mountain gate like the Dragon Gate as a pass. However, Chu Xiu directly abandoned it and directly faced the enemy at the peak of the Kunlun mountain. The Dragon Gate had been completely destroyed. Although it was rebuilt, it was only for show. On the Kunlun mountain, Chu Xiu let Master Yuan Ji and other spell formation masters of the Kunlun devil cult take action together. They rearranged the formation according to the formation left behind by the heaven-weeping demon Venerable. Although it was not at the level of the Kunlun devil cult in the past, it was still barely usable. With the fierce shouts of "Exterminate the demon," teams of righteous martial artists climbed the mountain peak one by one. The pressure even caused the wind and clouds to roar and roll angrily on the entire Kunlun mountain. The momentum rushed to the sky, causing the newcomers of the Kunlun devil cult who had not experienced the flames of war to turn pale. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu walked out and laughed. "Everyone, are you here to congratulate the sacred cult's reconstruction? There are quite a lot of people here, but fortunately, the Kunlun mountain is big enough to accommodate all of you. However, where's the congratulatory gift?" In the face of this level of power, Chu Xiu could still laugh. There was not even a trace of seriousness on his face. Although the people present were enemies with Chu Xiu, they had to admit that Chu Xiu was really a character. Ling Yunzi said in a deep voice, "Congratulatory gift? The congratulatory gift is the sword in our hands. Chu Xiu, from the day you came to Kunlun, you should have expected this day. However, you didn't expect this day to come so soon, did you?" Chu Xiu shook his head. "Taoist Ling Yunzi is a monk. Is it appropriate for you to shout about killing?" A sharp look appeared in Ling Yunzi's eyes. "Taoism suppresses demons and exterminates evil. It can be considered as accumulating merit." Su Ci of the Great Light Temple stood out and chanted the name of Buddha. Buddhism also has the wrath of the Vajra subduing demons and the fire of Wisdom King to suppress evil. The elder ancestor of the Ying clan of Xianxia, Ying Si, shook his head. "Chu Xiu, with your talent, your future is limitless. Unfortunately, you made a wrong choice. It is not easy to enter the Kunlun devil cult. You may come, but you may not be able to sit firmly. What a pity. Originally, with the Ying clan's style, they would not intervene in this kind of thing. However, as the elder ancestor of the Ying clan said, Kunlun Mountain was very important. No one was willing to see the devil's prestige return to the martial world, including the Ying clan of Xianxia who had always maintained a neutral position. On the side of the Sabodhi monastery, the first to stand out was not Rama, but an unfamiliar old monk. Seeing Rama standing respectfully behind him, the martial artists of the other righteous sects were stunned because even they did not recognize this old monk. When Lu Jianghu saw the old monk, he was shocked and shouted, "Old bald donkey Bukong! You are actually still alive." Chu Xiu looked at Lu Jianghu and said, "He is a person from 500 years ago. How is his strength?" Lu Jianghu nodded and quickly said, 500 years ago, he was a heaven and earth Tongxian realm martial artist from the Sabodhi monastery. To be more accurate, he should be the strongest among the ascetics of that generation, undying godly monk, Bukong monk. This old bald donkey's strength is a little hard to say, but he is extremely difficult to deal with. Let me put it this way, he once fought with the heartless demon Venerable. He is one of the few who can survive under the hands of the heartless demon Venerable. The heartless demon Venerable's attacks are extremely crazy. It is either you die or I die. He is not the strongest among the 4 demon Venerables, but he is the one that all martial artists do not want to face. This old monk can survive under the hands of the heartless demon Venerable. You can imagine how strong he is. That's right, this bald donkey seems to have cultivated the Sabodhi monastery's undying meditation. He actually managed to cultivate this kind of thing successfully. His dog shit luck is really good. At this moment, the monk Bukong also looked towards Chu Xiu and the others. The gaze he used to look at Chu Xiu carried a trace of strangeness. That's because there was a familiar feeling coming from Chu Xiu's body. However, he could not recall what it was. 500 years of undying meditation, it was equivalent to him sleeping for 500 years. Although his life force had recovered, it was inevitable that his primordial spirit would suffer some damage, causing him to forget some details and other things. Chapter 1062. Bukong monk looked at Chu Xiu and felt that he was very familiar, but he did not pay much attention to it. He already knew that Chu Xiu had obtained a part of the Kunlun devil cult's inheritance, and he even had a part of Dugu Weiwei's demonic arts. Maybe something on him was left behind by an old friend, so it was normal for him to feel that it was familiar. Therefore, Wukong monk was only slightly puzzled for a moment before he turned to look at Lu Jianghe and said with a faint smile, "So it's the Blood Demon Hall's hall leader Lu. 500 years have passed, and I feel very gratified to be able to meet an old friend. I heard that back then, Hall Master Lu was imprisoned by Dugu Weiwa. But who would have thought that after 500 years, you would still choose to stand on the side of the Kunlun demon sect? Such loyalty is something that this old monk did not expect." Wukong monk's words were not only unbearable to Chu Xiu and the others, but even Lu Jianghe's face turned slightly red. Whether it was 500 years ago or 500 years later, this was the first time he heard someone use the word loyalty to evaluate him. "Since you managed to escape 500 years ago, why do you insist on throwing your life away today?" The person who suddenly stood up was an old man from the Storm Sword Mound. He was very old, and his whole body exuded a smell of decay. He held a long sword wrapped in an old ebony scabbard in his hand. He spoke slowly, coughing after every few words he uttered. But seeing this person, the expressions of Chu Wuji and the others suddenly changed. "Who is this?" Chu Wuji said with some shock, "The previous leader of the Storm Sword Mound, Sword Venerable, Zhongli Mu, who was ranked 9th on the sovereign list. Although this guy wasn't from that era 500 years ago, he was the personal disciple of the Storm Sword Mound Sword Emperor, Jianghu. According to age, he was already over 400 years old. Zhongli Mu had already disappeared from the Jianghu more than 100 years ago. There was no news of his death from the Storm Sword Tomb, but everyone thought that he was dead. More than a decade ago, Wind Sweeping Tower removed him from the sovereign ranking and Wind Cloud Sword Tomb didn't say a word. Who would have thought that this old man was still alive? Simply unreasonable. Although in theory, heaven and earth mysterious realm could also live for more than 400 years, how many people in Jianghu could truly live to this age? Because Zen Master Wukong cultivated the undying Zen, he was the same as Lu Jianghe who had his primordial spirit sealed. He was not truly alive, so his lifespan was still the same as a normal martial artist's. In the entire Jianghu, only the old Celestial Master from the Celestial Master's mansion had lived the longest. He had even lived so long that he had surpassed the limits of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. For Zhongli Mu to be able to live until now, it was as if he was the second old Celestial Master. Lu Jianghe also said in a low voice, "This old man is not easy to deal with. His master is Jianghu. That guy was a troublesome person back then. His strength was completely on par with the 4 great demon sovereigns, but he had been holding back and waiting for the sect master to die before he made a move. A disciple personally trained by Jianghu is definitely not an ordinary person." Chu Xiu nodded. Of course, he knew that the other party was not an ordinary person. It should be said that as long as one could step into the heaven and earth mysterious realm, there was no ordinary person at all. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu laughed and said, "A total of 6 heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouses personally came to cause trouble for me. This treatment is simply better than Sect Master Ye's." "Oh right, speaking of Sect Master Yi, he should have appeared now, right?" As Chu Xiu's voice fell, Yi Xiaonan's figure leaped from Mount Kunlun and just stood at the side, not saying a word. This battle had nothing to do with him. He was just waiting for Jun Wuxian, so in the entire moon-worshipping cult, except for him, no one else came. But the others did not know this. With Yi Xiaonan's character, he would not go and explain and so on. At this time, seeing Yi Xiaonan appear here, everyone was shocked. On Chu Xiu's side, there was only Shang Tianliang to support the facade, so they were not afraid. But at this time, with the addition of Yi Xiaonan, there was an additional variable. Everyone present, even the monk Wukong, who escaped from the hands of the heartless demon sovereign 500 years ago, when facing Yi Xiaonan, did not dare to say that he could win. At this time, Chu Xiu looked indifferent, but in his heart, he was a little anxious. Why was that person not here yet? If he did not come, there was no way to continue this show. Yi Xiaonan only came for Jun Wuxian. When it was really time to fight, he would not help. Chu Xiu took a deep breath, stood up, and said in a deep voice, 500 years ago, my sacred cult was destroyed in the hands of the righteous path of martial arts. The wheel of fortune has turned, and now it is our devil path's turn to rise again. When swords and weapons meet, it is a fight to the death. Why talk about those hypocritical principles? Ling Yunzi did not refute, but just nodded and said, if you say so, it is true. Between the righteous path and the devil path, only swords and weapons are left. 500 years ago, our ancestors were able to destroy the Kunlun devil cult once, and now, we can still do it. As Ling Yunzi's voice fell, he wanted everyone to attack together and directly attack the Kunlun devil cult. Although Yi Xiaonan was strong, with so many people attacking together, it would be fine as long as they could delay Yi Xiaonan. With so many big sects of the righteous path joining forces, it was enough to destroy the Kunlun devil cult that had not yet grown up. But at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, Taoist Ling Yunzi, the attack on my sacred cult this time should be caused by your Chunyang Dao sect again, right? All these years, I've killed quite a number of people from your pure Yang Dao sect. However, Daoist Ling Yunzi, do you still remember when I, Chu Xiu, was the one who initiated all these intense battles? Ling Yunzi said faintly, eliminating demons and defending the righteous path, the few comrades of my Chunyang Dao sect died a worthy death. Although Ling Yunzi said so, he still felt some heartache in his heart. Compared to other warriors of Chunyang Dao sect who had a radical character, Ling Yunzi was more clear-headed. Back then, when Chu Xiu was not so powerful, their Chunyang Dao sect was also in a period of decline, so there was no need to fight to the death with Chu Xiu. If Zhenyang Zi and the others could be more rational back then and not fight with Chu Xiu head-on, then now, with the power of many sects of the righteous path, they could completely get rid of Chu Xiu with the least loss. In the end, the head of the 2 generations of the 6 guardians of the Chunyang Dao sect died in the hands of Chu Xiu, and the rest of the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect also died in the hands of Chu Xiu, which could be said to be a heavy loss. In the end, these people could be said to have died in vain. Chu Xiu laughed and said, what a worthy death. The righteous path and devil path are on opposite sides, but your Chunyang Dao sect and I have a personal grudge. Leader Ling Yunzi, you and I have fought more than once or twice in the past. This time, in front of everyone, you and I will fight again. Do you dare or not? Seeing that Chu Xiu actually dared to challenge Ling Yunzi openly, everyone present had a strange look on their faces. Chu Xiu and Ling Yunzi had fought many times, but those times could be said to be forced to fight. But this time, he actually used the cultivation of the true fire spirit refinement realm to challenge the supreme expert of the mysterious heaven and earth realm in public. This kind of thing was extremely rare in the Jianghu. It should be said that there were not many of them. Was Chu Xiu prepared to struggle for glory before he died? If it were someone else, they would definitely not agree at this critical moment. Whether it was the righteous path or devil path, at this critical moment of life and death, the so-called fair one-on-one fight was simply a joke. Moreover, to deal with this group of people from the devil path, was there any need for fairness? Everyone should fight side by side. Getting rid of the devil path was the right thing to do. However, the person that Chu Xiu challenged was Ling Yunzi. Ling Yunzi only hesitated for a moment, and he directly said coldly, then let's fight. I will let you accept your defeat wholeheartedly. For Ling Yunzi to be able to become an ultimate expert in the profound understanding of heaven and earth, even if his mental state could not be said to be strong, it was not weak either. However, it could be said that Ling Yunzi was truly obsessed with Chu Xiu. When he was in the true fire spirit refinement realm, Ling Yunzi could not defeat Chu Xiu. When he reached the mysterious heaven and earth realm, he still could not defeat him. The most important thing was that these 2 battles were not because he was defeated by Chu Xiu, but because of external factors, he had to withdraw. Of course, the people in the Jianghu would not care about the hidden reasons. They were all discussing that Ling Yunzi was the weakest expert of the mysterious heaven and earth realm and so on. Even if Ling Yunzi did not care about some of the voices in the outside world, he could not stand being discussed and slandered every day. One could imagine how sullen his mood was. Now that Chu Xiu had issued a challenge in front of everyone, he had no reason to refuse. Chu Xiu was already a turtle in a jar. At present, almost all the righteous sects in the Jianghu had gathered in the Kunlun mountain and directly suppressed him with force. He did not believe that Chu Xiu could still play any tricks. Without external forces to interfere with him, this time he wanted to show others whether he could defeat Chu Xiu. Of course, if others were to know Ling Yunzi's thoughts, they would probably feel sad for him. No matter what, Ling Yunzi was an ultimate powerhouse in the Elysium of Heaven and Earth realm. He actually had to rely on defeating Chu Xiu, a martial art practitioner in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, to prove his strength. One could imagine how sullen he was. When the others saw this scene, they could not help but frown, obviously a little dissatisfied. At this time, there was no need to play a one-on-one challenge. The most important thing was to directly deal with Chu Xiu and break through the Kunlun devil cult. Playing this kind of game would only be a waste of time. But now that Ling Yunzi had agreed, it was not good for them to say anything. Among the experts of the mysterious heaven and earth realm present, Ling Yunzi was not the strongest. He might be the weakest. But after all, this matter was initiated by him. Taoism had a great say in the alliance of the righteous sects. Therefore, although they were dissatisfied, it was not good for them to refute at this time. Anyway, it would only be a little bit of time. Chu Xiu clenched the devil's saber in his hand and let out a long breath. At present, he could only delay the time like this. If that person still did not come, he could only use his trump card in advance. Chapter 1063. The difference between the Elysium of Heaven and Earth and the spiritual cultivation with true fire was like the difference between heaven and man. Ling Yunzi had fought with Chu Xiu more than once or twice. He had to admit that Chu Xiu's power was indeed extremely powerful. Cultivating both the spiritual cultivation with true fire and the physical cultivation with true fire at the same time, Chu Xiu's current state was almost the most perfect state for a martial artist. His heart and mind were one, his chi and body were one, and his spirit and heaven were one. An extremely powerful physical body and a power foundation that had developed to the peak among those in the same realm allowed Chu Xiu to fight with those in the Elysium of Heaven and Earth. However, no matter how powerful a person was, there was still a limit. When faced with a powerhouse in the Elysium of Heaven and Earth who controlled the world, no matter how strong Chu Xiu was, he could only be stronger than the person, not the world. This time, Ling Yunzi did not use his pure yang divine weapon, even though Shi Yunzi had come with him. If he still used Ancestor Lu's divine weapon to deal with Chu Xiu, a martial artist in the spiritual cultivation with true fire, then even if he won this battle, he would probably continue to be laughed at by the people of the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu happened to notice this as well. He smiled and said, "Sect leader Ling Yunzi, don't you need to change your weapon?" Ling Yunzi said indifferently, "I don't need to change my weapon to deal with you." Chu Xiu clenched the broken formation in his hand and said, "Sect leader Ling Yunzi, you don't need to change your weapon, but I have a new demon blade now. Sect leader will be my first opponent to test it. Today, I'll see if this demon blade of mine is sharp or not." As soon as Chu Xiu finished speaking, he had already made the first move. A hint of coldness appeared on Ling Yunzi's face. Although the long sword in his hand was not Ancestor Lu's divine weapon, it was also a pure yang divine sword passed down through the generations of Chunyang Dao sect. The sword light was unsheathed. In an instant, everything in the sky and on the ground was enveloped by the pure sunlight. Even though the peak of Mount Kunlun was extremely large, the scorching pure yang radiance still enveloped an area of nearly 10 miles. The powerful qi activity was like a scorching sun traversing across the sky, transforming into a domain that completely enveloped Chu Xiu. Tens of thousands of sword lights fell with incomparably terrifying might. When the other Elysium of Heaven and Earth supreme powerhouses saw Ling Yunzi attack, they all nodded subtly. To be honest, Ling Yunzi was not as bad as the outside world made him out to be. Although he had just advanced to the profound understanding of heaven and earth, he had accumulated an extremely deep foundation in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Although he had the cultivation, the heaven and earth supreme powerhouses divine, and had light, the demon's gang, and spirit with realm, and the earth, and the god, had, and the earth, and the demon and realm, and demon, and when one reached the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, it was extremely difficult to advance further. This included Rama, who was the youngest among them. Although he was talented and unparalleled, it was almost impossible for him to advance by leaps and bounds in this realm. He had to be like other warriors of the same rank and use time to accumulate his strength. Being in the Elysium of heaven and earth, it was extremely difficult to advance further. This included Rama, who was the youngest among them. Although his talent was unparalleled, it was almost impossible for him to advance by leaps and bounds in this realm. He had to be like other warriors of the same level and use time to accumulate his strength. Ling Yunzi had used his full strength right from the start, and it was obvious exactly how deep his desire to defeat Chu Xiu was. Chu Xiu's blade slashed down, and the long and narrow blade of the breaking formation trembled slightly. Although it was a demon blade, there was not much demon chi surrounding it. It did not look like a demon weapon at all. However, as the breaking formation slashed down, Chu Xiu directly used the Misty Slash's blade momentum to slash out. In an instant, the world seemed to freeze. Ling Yunzi's expression did not change, but the sword momentum in his hand became even more ferocious. He naturally recognized Dugu Weiwei's misty red dust slash in the past. Many experts had died under this slash. However, when Chu Xiu used it, it was useless. The misty slash could confine a space, but it could not confine this part of the world. This was because this was Ling Yunzi's domain, and only he could completely control it. However, at this moment, an unexpected scene happened. Wherever Chu Xiu's blade passed, the entire pure yang domain seemed to be torn open, and an endless amount of pure yang power leaked out. The sword radiance scattered, and the misty slash fell. The two collided, and suddenly, a powerful chi movement exploded. The explosive gang chi scattered in all directions, and even formed a huge vortex in mid-air, stirring up the wind and clouds. It was not surprising that Chu Xiu had blocked Ling Yunzi's move. If he did not have this bit of power, Chu Xiu would not have dared to challenge Ling Yunzi. However, what was shocking was that he had actually cut open Ling Yunzi's domain. Although the Elysium of heaven and earth claimed to be able to control heaven and earth, true control of heaven and earth was something that only immortals could do. The heaven and earth controlled by the Elysium of heaven and earth, to be precise, was the world within one's own domain. Throughout history, when existences in the Elysium of heaven and earth fought, it was extremely difficult to break the other party's domain. The simplest way was to use the domain against the domain, and forcibly break it. However, only the heavens knew what method Chu Xiu had used. To think that he had managed to slash out a crack in Ling Yunzi's domain with a single slash, allowing the external powers of the heavens and earth to gush in. In an instant, the pure yang radiance dissipated and the domain shattered. Ling Yunzi looked at Chu Xiu in front of him in disbelief. He could actually cut open his domain? For the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of heaven and earth, the domain was only a symbolic means after they had advanced to this realm. Even without the domain, they were still the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of heaven and earth. Even when fighting with warriors of the same level, the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of heaven and earth rarely used their domains. You have a domain, and I also have a domain. When two people used their domains to collide, it was equivalent to a simple wrestling between low-level warriors. There was no technical content, and it was very boring. However, when facing a warrior of a lower realm than oneself, the existence of the domain could completely suppress the existence of the domain. This was also Chu Xiu. If it were anyone else, when facing the domain of the Elysium of heaven and earth, all power would be directly sealed, so that one could not even borrow a bit of the heaven and earth power. While Ling Yunzi was stunned, Chu Xiu's figure had already rushed towards Ling Yunzi. The powerful chi movement seemed to be able to tear the sky and earth apart. As the blade fell, everything in front of him was accurately cut into two. In the eyes of the other powerhouses, it seemed that the whole world had been divided into three parts. The heaven and earth on the left, the heaven and earth on the right, and Chu Xiu's blade. The blade intent of the breaking word formula was executed. Together with the incomparable sharpness of the breaking formation, it went straight for Ling Yunzi. The might was enough to make the Elysium of heaven and earth take it seriously. At this moment, the Bukong monk suddenly said, "His blade is very familiar. Dugu Weiwei used it before." Everyone present was instantly shocked. The Ying family patriarch asked, "Did Chu Xiu obtain Dugu Weiwei's demonic blade, listen to the spring rain?" However, after saying this, the Ying family patriarch felt that something was wrong. Although none of them had seen what the demonic blade, listen to the spring rain, looked like, they still had a description of it. It was definitely not like Chu Xiu's blade. The Bukong monk said, "It's not listen to the spring rain. I am referring to the aura of his blade. It is exactly the same as listen to the spring rain. These two blades are existences from the same source. They are supreme demonic weapons. Once they appear, they will drink blood and slaughter the common people." Luo Mo, who was at the side, said, "Don't worry, Reverend. This time, the demonic blade will not have the chance to drink blood." The Bukong monk sighed and said, "I hope so." After cultivating the undying Zen, although he had reconstructed his body, his primordial spirit and spirit were still slightly damaged. They were a little sluggish. In the past, his spiritual perception was very sensitive. However, it was now a little sluggish. He could sense that something was amiss, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. At this moment, Ling Yunzi looked at the blade that Chu Xiu slashed at him. A trace of cold light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, he also discovered the abnormality of the formation-breaking technique. This blade could actually shatter the domain. However, it did not matter. Other than the domain, it was not as if he did not have other methods. The long sword pointed continuously. The scorching pure yang astral qi condensed in midair. It turned into the two words, pure yang, in midair. It was like a huge rune that smashed down towards Chu Xiu. The two words, pure yang, were left behind by Ancestor Lu in the past. They contained the pure yang true meaning. The power of the demon-suppressing rune was almost at its peak. However, the saber intent of the break formula was too sharp to the extreme. Even if the talisman with the pure yang true meaning fell, it would still be cut in half when the saber intent of the break formula was displayed to the extreme. However, at this moment, the word pure on the left and the word yang on the right exploded with scorching rays of pure sunlight at the same time. Within it, there was a faint sword aura blooming. However, the sword aura condensed into the shape of a sword silk. It was like a golden thread that wrapped around Chu Xiu's body. In an instant, he was trapped in it, forming a huge golden cocoon. On the huge cocoon, the two words, pure yang, were vivid. The pure yang demon-suppressing rune was still successful. The sword venerable of the wind cloud sword tomb, Zhongli Mu, said in a hoarse voice, condensing sword intent and entering the pure yang. Headmaster Ling Yunzi is not simple. His attainments in the sword Dao and pure yang Dao connotation have reached the peak. In the Dao sect, his Dao connotation is unparalleled. He can be a headmaster. In the sword sect, his sword Dao is ever-changing. He can still be called a sword Dao grandmaster. He can split heaven and earth with his sword. For generations, the Chunyang Dao sect had used the sword as their weapon. However, the Dao sect was not a sword sect. For most of the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect, they would always focus on cultivating the pure yang qi. As for the sword Dao, it was just a cultivation method, a method. However, Ling Yunzi had also cultivated the sword Dao to an extremely profound level. He could even get a person like Zhongli Mu to personally praise him. One could imagine how strong his attainments in the sword Dao were. The sword condensed the pure yang energy. Just as Ling Yunzi was about to finish off Chu Xiu, a shrill cry that sounded like the roar of a ghost came from the sky. The heavens cried, blood rain fell and landed on the huge golden cocoon, melting it completely. What was revealed was Chu Xiu, who was wrapped in the world-extinguishing fire and was surrounded by a monstrous demonic flame. In the next moment, a huge shadow of a demon crossed the sky. As if it was tearing the sky and earth apart, it grabbed at Ling Yunzi. Chapter 1064. As a supreme expert in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, it was not a glorious thing to fight back and forth with Chu Xiu, a warrior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm. However, Ling Yunzi also had to admit that Chu Xiu's strength had basically reached the peak of the true fire spiritual cultivation realm. The power of a single powerful martial skill was already not much different from the existence of the heaven and earth mysterious realm. When Chu Xiu executed a legendary martial technique like the heaven and earth conquering demon lamenting heaven and crying great compassion mantra, its might was simply astonishing. Ling Yunzi formed a Dao seal with his hand. In the next moment, the Dao markings on his body flickered and condensed into a complicated talisman that went up against the gigantic demon god's shadow. One after another, runes shining with pure yang energy blossomed, and finally engulfed the huge demon god phantom completely, directly sealing it. Chu Xiu frowned slightly. The gap between him and the mysterious realm of heaven and earth was not something that a saber could make up for. After all, the mystic insight of heaven and earth was still the mystic insight of heaven and earth. Even without a domain, it was still the mystic insight of heaven and earth. It was just that when Chu Xiu fought with Ling Yunzi in the past, he might have been forced to use the blood demon transformation technique to fight with his life on the line. But now, he didn't have to be in such a sorry state. However, the consumption of both sides was equal. Even the current Chu Xiu would find it hard to endure the continuous use of the breaking word formula saber intent and the heaven and earth conquering devil cries heaven great compassion mantra. On the other hand, Ling Yunzi did not need to risk his life. As long as he exerted his strength normally, he could completely exhaust Chu Xiu until he was exhausted. Chu Xiu's strength was indeed powerful, but no matter how powerful it was, it could not withstand such consumption. Ling Yunzi seemed to have noticed this as well. Therefore, his attacks became neither too fast nor too slow as he slowly controlled the rhythm. On the pure yang sword in his hand, scorching rays of pure sunlight swallowed and spurted out, triggering the blazing sun Dao connotation as he slashed at Chu Xiu's sword. As long as Chu Xiu didn't use a powerful martial technique like the breaking formula, he would continue to waste time like this. Just like that, the two sides fought for a full 15 minutes. This was simply unimaginable in the eyes of others. Sometimes, the stronger the battle, the faster it would end. Fighting for 3 days and 3 nights was pure nonsense. A fight between experts did not allow for even the slightest mistake. Moreover, the strength and foundation of both of them were there for all to see. The victor and the loser would soon be known. Unless it was a fight between two martial artists with the same strength and combat experience, and neither of them was in a hurry and didn't want to risk their lives, then they would fight for 3 days and 3 nights. Ling Yunzi's brows were tightly knitted together as he attacked. He felt that something was wrong. This was not the first time he had fought with Chu Xiu. He knew that although Chu Xiu was young, his combat experience was incomparably rich. He should already know that he was prepared to exhaust his strength. He also knew that Chu Xiu had a secret technique. Although it would cost him a lot of energy, he would be able to unleash an extremely powerful force in an instant to fight for his life. Even he had to be careful when dealing with it. But now, Chu Xiu seemed to be playing along with his routine. He was so slow and probing with him, not in a hurry at all. Could it be that he only wanted to live a little longer? Although Ling Yunzi and Chu Xiu were enemies, he also had to admit that Chu Xiu was a very strong enemy, in all aspects. And he also had the qualities that all the big bosses of the Devil Path had. He was ruthless, patient, decisive, resourceful, and crazy. Chu Xiu was not afraid of death. On the contrary, if he was provoked, he would do crazy things. Now, Chu Xiu's behavior was very inconsistent with his character. And up until now, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry, but he was a little anxious. Some people from the righteous path were already discussing in a low voice, saying that he had not been able to take down Chu Xiu after such a long time. They were obviously here to exterminate the devil path, but in the end, they let the devil path master show off his power here and so on. The person who spoke was naturally not from the Chunyang Dao sect, but he could not control the people from other sections. There was also a strong person behind him, but they did not care. Obviously, they were a little dissatisfied with Ling Yunzi's delay here. Gritting his teeth, Ling Yunzi had to use all his strength to rush forward again, ready to directly defeat Chu Xiu. He originally thought that this time, he could not consider external factors and defeat Chu Xiu openly. In the end, who would have thought that in the end, he was still affected by external factors? Chu Xiu also sighed. Ling Yunzi could not bear it anymore. It seemed that he could not delay for much longer. Chu Xiu subconsciously looked to the west. How could the people from Heavenly Gates be so calm? Both sides exchanged a few more fierce blows. The powerful force had even formed a huge cyclone on the peak of the entire Kunlun mountain. It was unknown when it would explode. At this moment, Ling Yunzi bit his finger and quickly drew a line of runes on the pure yang sword. The scorching blood seemed to ignite the pure yang sword. In an instant, the long sword pointed to the sky, attracting the wind and thunder of heaven and earth. The brilliance of the blazing sun was like a huge beam of light. It was received by Ling Yunzi in mid-air onto his long sword. The scorching power came from the blazing sun. Even the divine weapon in his hand could not withstand this power. The weapon's spirit let out a cry. As the sword slashed down, the scorching power had already enveloped the main peak of Kunlun Mountain. Within a radius of more than 10 miles, the power that was covered by ice and snow began to melt rapidly, causing an avalanche to crash down. At this moment, Chu Xiu did not use the blood demon transformation technique to risk his life. Instead, he turned around and the blade of the saber emitted endless apocalyptic flames. Like a spark setting a prairie ablaze, the saber slashed down. There was only a sliver of apocalyptic flames, but it ignited the entire mountain peak and completely enveloped Ling Yunzi. Domain. All the existences at the heaven and earth elemental illumination realm were shocked. Now, what Chu Xiu had cast was exactly the same as the heaven and earth elemental illumination realm's domain. The boundless flames of world devastation enveloped Ling Yunzi completely. The domain formed by the flames of world devastation cut off the connection between Ling Yunzi's supreme sword and the light of the sun, causing its power to no longer increase. There was a loud bang, and the power of the explosion in mid-air even distorted the void. The powerful storm forced the existences below the real fire spirit refinement realm to retreat hurriedly. Even the real pellet state's grandmaster couldn't resist this aftermath. The dazzling pure yang sword beam slashed apart the domain formed by the world annihilation fire. Although it was still very powerful, it was no longer the apocalyptic scene from before. The saber intent of the word break slashed out again, and the pure sunlight light was extinguished. Chu Xiu's figure retreated more than 100 meters. Ling Yunzi's figure didn't retreat, but the horrified expression on his face couldn't be concealed. His ultimate killer move was actually blocked by Chu Xiu, and it was even blocked in the form of a domain. How is this possible? Chu Xiu, who was blasted away on the opposite side, also breathed a sigh of relief. He was able to cause such power because Ling Yunzi himself was actually the most important. Breaking the formation could return all kinds of energy to its origin. Just now, when they were slowly exchanging blows, almost all of the energy that Ling Yunzi used was turned into extreme Yin energy by breaking the formation. However, Ling Yunzi didn't care. Shang Tianliang noticed the change in the power of breaking the array just now because he was familiar with Chu Xiu, and he had time to observe carefully. But Ling Yunzi was in a fierce battle, how could he think of such subtle things? Besides, this is Kunlun Mountain, the base camp of the demonic cult. Isn't it normal for the power of extreme Yin to be stronger and richer? As a result, he neglected that the subtle power of extreme Yin at the beginning had accumulated more and more in the process of their fight, and it was finally ignited by Chu Xiu directly with the apocalyptic flames, forming something similar to a domain. That was actually not a domain, but the power of extreme yin was too strong. In that domain, apart from the power of extreme yin, he couldn't absorb any other kind of power. Ling Yunzi looked at Chu Xiu, and a smile suddenly appeared at the corner of his mouth. Before this, I always thought that my state of mind was strong enough, but I lost to you twice, and in addition to the comments of others, it made my state of mind a little unbalanced. But now I understand that there are talented people in every generation, regardless of camp. You, Chu Xiu, are indeed a rare talent in the world. At the same age, I am not as good as you, and even if I give you some time, the current me is still not as good as you. My Chunyang Dao sect is your enemy, and it is normal to lose. If it were anyone else, they would also lose. Because of this kind of thing, it causes the state of mind to be unbalanced, which is very ridiculous. Back then, you destroyed my inner demon, allowing me to step into the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. And in this battle, you helped me to calm my state of mind. I already don't know whether to thank you or to kill you. Ling Yunzi understood and resolved the imbalance in his state of mind. Although this was not very helpful to his strength, it could make him more peaceful in the future cultivation. However, while Ling Yunzi had figured everything out, Chu Xiu was in trouble. Ling Yunzi said in a low voice, "This battle no longer has any meaning. Whether I win or lose, the outcome is the same. Chu Xiu, don't waste any more time. I won't ask you if you are going to surrender or resist to the end, because I know that you are not a person who will admit defeat and lower your head. After you die, I will leave a tomb for you in the back mountain of the Chunyang Dao sect, and I will return the karma of my advancement to the mysterious realm of heaven and earth to you after you die. Although you are an opponent worthy of respect." After Ling Yunzi's state of mind was clear, he became very magnanimous in doing things. His words also made some of the warriors present applaud repeatedly. Just as he was about to let the others attack together, an extremely terrifying aura came from the bottom of the Kunlun mountain. The aura was so strong that it made the few mysterious realm existences at the scene tremble. Only Yi Xiaonan looked up, but there was a touch of excitement in her eyes. Red hair and black robe, with a towering aura. Jun Wuxian didn't walk up the mountain. Instead, he walked step by step in the air. Wherever he passed, the warriors would make way for him. They looked at Jun Wuxian as if they were looking at a real god. Seeing Jun Wuxian appear, Chu Xiu was relieved, and said to Ling Yunzi with a smile, "Sect Master Ling Yunzi is generous, but I will not use the tomb for the time being. If you die in my hands in the future, I will also leave a tomb for you in the Kunlun mountain." Chapter 1065. The appearance of Jun Wuxian here was not a surprise to anyone. Although Kunlun mountain was big, it could not accommodate two sections. When Dugu Weiwei was here, Kunlun only referred to the devil cult, and Elysium was almost slaughtered by Dugu Weiwei. With the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult, the east and west heavens slowly replaced the west Kunlun devil cult, and became known as the west Kunlun Elysium. So as long as Chu Xiu rebuilt the devil cult on Kunlun mountain, the first to react should be Elysium. Even if Chu Xiu did not kill the god general of Elysium, Elysium would not allow such a thing to happen. So in the beginning, Ling Yunzi and the others did not react. In fact, they were also waiting for the people of Elysium to react. If Elysium could deal with Chu Xiu, that would be the best. They could then focus on finding clues about Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation. But who would have thought that after such a long time, the people of Elysium did not make a move, as if they had tacitly agreed to Chu Xiu rebuilding the devil cult, so they could only deal with Chu Xiu themselves. The battle had not even begun and Jun Wuxian had already arrived. Moreover, looking at the imposing manner that Jun Wuxian was exuding, it was obvious that he wanted to completely eradicate Chu Xiu's faction. Hence, Ling Yunzi and the others subconsciously retreated. If Jun Wuxian wanted to take action, they naturally wouldn't stop him. With Jun Wuxian taking action, their disciples could be sacrificed a little less. After all, Chu Xiu and his subordinates weren't weaklings. Most importantly, there was still Yi Xiaonan. At this time, Yi Xiaonan was also looking at Jun Wuxian, and his eyes revealed a hint of fighting spirit. Last time in the primitive demon cave, to be honest, although Yi Xiaonan saw Jun Wuxian and Zhong Xinxiu fight, he did not understand it. He could only say that he saw a part of it. Of course, this was better than the others because besides Yi Xiaonan, the others didn't even understand the slightest bit. After refining the congenital demon seed, Yi Xiaonan's strength and realm had improved a lot, even to the extent that Chu Xiu could not see through. At this time, Yi Xiaonan already had the qualifications to go one step further and pry into the realm of martial immortal that only legendary existences could reach. But the awkward thing was that Yi Xiaonan had no clue at all about this step. As for the realms above the mysterious opening of heaven and earth, as long as they were the peak sects from the ancient era, they would actually have records of them. Even the term martial immortal existed in a small portion of the ancient era's records. However, there were no detailed descriptions of the realms. So, no one knew if the two words, martial immortal, represented a realm, or if it was a title given when one's battle strength reached a certain limit. However, they were certain that those who were able to reach the martial immortal realm possessed battle power that ordinary profound understanding experts could not compare to. In the current Jianghu, everyone recognized that there were only two people who had reached this realm and completely surpassed the profound understanding of heaven and earth. One was Dugu Weiwei, and the other was Ning Xuanji. But after seeing Zhong Xinxiu and Jun Wuxian fight in the primitive demon cave, they had to add these two to the list. Although they didn't know if these two had reached the level of Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji in the past, it was clear that they had surpassed the current profound understanding experts in the Jianghu by a large step. This person even included Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan also wanted to take this step, but he definitely didn't have any cultivation techniques or experience. He could only rely on himself to forcefully comprehend it. Also, it was to watch existences of this level fight, and even challenge them to accumulate experience in this realm. Last time in the primitive demon cave, when Zhong Xinxiu and Jun Wuxian fought, Yi Xiaonan could only understand a small part of it. But now, he was confident that he could understand a large part of it. This time, it was Chu Xiu who invited him. If Chu Xiu didn't say anything, with Yi Xiaonan's character, he might even go to the gate of heaven to challenge Jun Wuxian. If he didn't have a heart that could die in peace, Yi Xiaonan wouldn't have been able to create the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra, and he wouldn't have become the current #1 demonic cultivator. Jun Wuxian also felt the fighting spirit in Yi Xiaonan's eyes, but he didn't care. A lion wouldn't care about a wild cat's challenge, nor would he care about his ambition. Moreover, he came this time to kill Chu Xiu. Previously, Chu Xiu didn't know that Jun Wuxian was injured so badly last time, and he had been in seclusion. He was also wondering why the Gate of Heaven had not reacted, even when Divine Lord Luo was killed. In fact, Jun Wuxian's reaction was already very fast. When he came out of seclusion and learned that Divine Lord Luo had died in the hands of Chu Xiu, the first thing he did was to go to Eastern Kunlun to kill Chu Xiu. Staring at Chu Xiu, Jun Wuxian slowly said, "You are very lucky. Last time you killed Kuang Xieyue, I was blocked by Zhong Xinxiu. This time, you killed Divine Lord Luo, and I was in seclusion. But your luck is equally bad. Why did you provoke the Gate of Heaven? The Gate of Heaven Divine Generals aren't real gods and can be killed, but the person who killed the Gate of Heaven Divine General can't live either." Lu Jianghe laughed and said, "What about the sect master?" Jun Wuxian suddenly looked over. In an instant, Lu Jianghe felt that the 6 paths of reincarnation in front of him were rotating and changing. In an instant, it was as if he was thrown into the 6 paths of reincarnation and went through a whole cycle. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't collapse after being trapped for 500 years and that his willpower was strong enough to break free after experiencing a reincarnation, he would have been trapped in that endless reincarnation forever and become an idiot. But even so, Lu Jianghe's state of mind and primordial spirit were damaged in an instant. In an instant, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned pale. F***CK. What a loss. If he did not refine a true fire, even a spirit refinement realm expert would not be able to make up for the blood he spat out. Chu Wuji, Mei Qinglian, and those who were familiar with Lu Jianghe, twitched their mouths. This bad habit of his mouth hadn't been cured even after 500 years. They felt that Lu Jianghe would die because of his mouth sooner or later. Lu Jianghe was also very helpless. The last time he saw Jun Wuxian attack, it was called magnificent. In the end, who would have thought that Jun Wuxian would even know primordial spirit's secret skills? Moreover, his attainments were simply beyond imagination, and he was seriously injured with just one look. Chu Xiu stood out and shook his head. To be precise, it should be the divine generals of Tianmen who had bad luck meeting me. Over the years, although the divine generals of Tianmen have died before, the number of them who died in the outside world can be counted on one hand. But they just had to meet me, and 2 of them died in a row. Shouldn't this be their bad luck? And Sect Master Jun, I feel that your luck is equally bad. Because as long as you meet me, you will meet the person you don't want to meet the most. Jun Wuxian was slightly stunned, but he didn't say anything. The 6 paths of reincarnation condensed behind him, and the shadow was distorting the space. It was as if the whole world was shrouded in his powerful aura. He wasn't good with words. Usually, he wouldn't say too much to the divine generals of Tianmen. If they were right, they would be rewarded. If they were wrong, they would be punished. It was that simple. Chu Xiu had killed 2 of his divine generals in a row. He was already dead. What's more, he dared to come back to Kunlun. Because of some kind of relationship, or some kind of fear, after Dugu Weiwei disappeared, the Elysians didn't attack the Kunlun devil cult, even though they had a great enmity. Even during the 500 years since the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult, the people of the Elysians hadn't stepped into East Kunlun to occupy this place. But Chu Xiu had rebuilt the Kunlun devil cult, and this was still challenging the bottom line of the Elysians. He must be killed. The power of the 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment light will begin to show. Previously in the primitive demon cave, although Jun Wuxian had been defeated by Zhongshanxiu, his 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment light will had left a deep impression on people. It was so powerful that it made people tremble. Everyone present thought that although Chu Xiu could fight Ling Yunzi to a standstill, he wouldn't be able to withstand a single move from Jun Wuxian. However, at this moment, a strange tremor suddenly came from the void. The calm void was like a piece of wrinkled cloth, torn from the middle. Zhongshanxiu, dressed in white, stepped out from it and said habitually, "Excuse me," but after seeing Chu Xiu, Zhongshanxiu swallowed the second half of his sentence and nodded as if he was very satisfied. Very accurate this time. Hearing Zhongshanxiu's words, Chu Xiu almost broke out in a cold sweat. In the past, there were times when he was inaccurate. Zhongshanxiu's existence was Chu Xiu's trump card. He owed Chu Xiu karma. This time, Chu Xiu dared to play so big because of Zhongshanxiu's existence. It was difficult for a man to defeat the heavens, but Zhongshanxiu's strength could undoubtedly defeat the heavens. He couldn't let Zhongshanxiu kill Jun Wuxian, Su Ci and Luo Mo, because they had karma on them. Chu Xiu had to settle for the next best thing. As long as he protected himself this time, it wouldn't affect his karma, right? Unless there was a karma requirement, Chu Xiu had to die here today. Chu Xiu could only blame his bad luck. And now that Zhongshanxiu had appeared, it proved that his plan had succeeded. But Zhongshanxiu's last words still gave him a big fright. From the moment Jun Wuxian appeared, Chu Xiu had already triggered the mark left by Zhongshanxiu in his mind to ask for help. Although Chu Xiu didn't know how Zhongshanxiu could instantly appear in front of him from the East Sea, an existence at Zhongshanxiu's level must have a way. It was just that Chu Xiu had forgotten that this person seemed to have a poor sense of direction. If he had come a few breaths later, perhaps Chu Xiu would have had to take on Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment wheel. Previously, Chu Xiu was very calm in front of Jun Wuxian. But if he remembered that Zhongshanxiu had a poor sense of direction, he probably wouldn't be able to remain calm either. Placing one's hopes on others was indeed very dangerous. This was Chu Xiu's first time, and it was likely that it would be the last time. Retreating, Chu Xiu gave the main stage to Zhongshanxiu. The next main role would not be him, but the Mahasvara Heavenly Lord's turn to perform. You're tuning in to the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.